Under heavy rain, several knights' bodies lie scattered across the ground. Kneeling, a man screams in despair, asking why everything had to come to this. A dark-haired young man holds someone in his arms and begs through his tears for the person not to die and to wake up. Desperate, he screams at the sky, begging someone to bring a healing potion. He calls out for Kai, not knowing where he is. He begs Lambda to appear. With no response, he grits his teeth and angrily asks why no one came to help them. This is the story of a complete fool who devoted his entire life to the sword, and the idiot who risked his own life to support him. He remembers the promise they made to save that world together. With tears filling his eyes, he confesses that none of this is possible without Lambda. Embracing his friend's body, he screams at the rainy sky, overwhelmed by grief. This is the story of two men who would one day become the heroes of their nation. The scene shifts to the Linea's domain on the eastern border of the Sylvester Empire. At the center of the region stands the Linea's family mansion. Outside a house, a group of men gathers around a bet. A smiling young man collects the money from the table, celebrating another round won. Beside him, the old gambler comments that he is on an incredible winning streak. The young man apologizes to the old man, calling him Mr. Yogi. Grumbling, Yogi promises that he will win back everything he lost in the next round. Sitting at the table, another young man advises the old man to give up, since he has already lost too much money. Yogi explodes in anger, shouting at the other man to shut up and insisting that he still has plenty of savings. The young man retorts, asking if he isn't talking about the money he was supposed to send to his granddaughter, and tells him to calm down. Irritated, Yogi shouts that he is already calm. An older man in a suit with a gray mustache suddenly appears, asking what all the noise is about. The group is startled when they recognize him as Master Yoda. Yoda observes that they are gambling again and considers it inappropriate for the discipline of a marquis's household. The young man who had been winning simply smiles awkwardly. The butler warns that their break must be limited, since the marquis could return at any moment, so this will be the final round. Everyone agrees, and the gambler announces to the group that the next round will be the last. A light-haired young man takes over the game, calling on everyone to bet big on this final round. He then picks up one of the boxes. Raising it, he warns that the prize is inside and that no one should take their eyes off it. As he shuffles the boxes from side to side, challenging the others to keep up if they can, Yogi and the others watch tensely, breaking into a cold sweat. No matter how hard he strains his eyes, Yogi can no longer tell which box is which. Watching from behind, Oda narrows his eyes, noticing something the others failed to see. He concludes to himself that the young man switched the boxes in the palm of his hand. Smiling, the trickster repeats that the boxes are spinning faster and faster. Suddenly, he stops everything and slams the boxes onto the table. Spreading his arms, he invites everyone to bet with confidence. Yogi and another man bet on the same box at the same time, convinced they have picked the right one. Yoda thinks to himself that he only saw the trick because of the angle from which he was standing, realizing that the game is designed to make it difficult for anyone to win. Even so, he wonders where that boy learned such incredible hand dexterity. Yogi clenches his fist and shouts excitedly that he saw everything this time. Yogi risks everything and bets 10 coins on the middle box, shouting that he will win back everything he lost that day. The young man beside him is startled by the amount, but Yogi insists that this is his chance to recover his losses. Miguel laughs and explains that since the old man has been losing all day and bet on the middle, the winner must certainly be in one of the other two boxes, a line of reasoning that leaves the others surprised. Teasing him, he says that luck has completely abandoned Yogi that day and that on days like this, the best thing to do is stay quiet. Yogi simply grumbles in annoyance. The other gamblers also join the round, throwing their coins onto the boxes. Watching from a distance, Yoda notices that Miguel split his bet between two different boxes. If the left one won, he would make a large profit because of the triple payout. If the right one won, he would still come out ahead, a calculated strategy to reduce the risk. When questioned, Miguel shrugs and says that it is just insurance. Yoda recognizes, still watching the group, that the young man's instinct for gambling is sharp. Everything indicates that the winning box will be the one on the left, exactly where Miguel placed his bet. As they wait for the result, Yogi thinks to himself that if he loses this bet, he will have no food for 5 days and no way to pay his granddaughter's allowance. With his hands clasped together, he quietly prays for the result he is hoping for. To everyone's surprise, Alpha reveals that the winning box is the middle one. Yogi gets it exactly right at the very end of the round. Yoda's eyes widen in disbelief at the result. Yogi jumps for joy, celebrating loudly. Relieved, he lets out a sigh and admits that it was a close call, saying that his wife would have killed him if he had lost that money. Miguel scratches his head in frustration, admitting to himself that he miscalculated this time. Even so, he congratulates the old man, who returns the compliment with a smug smile. Ending the break, Miguel calls everyone back to work. Before leaving, Yogi tosses a coin to Alpha, thanking the young man for his help with the game. Alpha thanks Yogi with a smile, punching the air in celebration. While tying up the bag of coins, Oda watches him from a distance, still suspicious. The butler calls him by name and asks whether the winning box really wasn't the one on the left as he had calculated. Surprised, Alpha asks if Oda noticed that and excitedly admits that the final round really was rigged. With a mischievous smile, he puts a finger to his lips, asking him to keep it a secret, and runs away with the money, leaving Yoda behind. Alone, the butler wonders, intrigued, when that boy switched the boxes without anyone noticing. Back to his daily routine, Alpha works as a stable boy on the Leonia's estate. A colleague impatiently asks him where he hid the manure he was supposed to collect. But his real name is Tui Shiba. In his previous life, he was a legendary gambler known in underground casinos as the God of Plague. Back then, he was surrounded by money, women, and alcohol, completely consumed by a life of excess. But too much luck also created hatred, and Tui eventually died miserably in an alley like a fool. Then he found himself reincarnated in this new world. At first, everything felt strange to him, a society without television, cell phones, buildings, or traffic, and on top of that, he lived in isolation with very few people around him. The feudal lord's mansion was impressive, but most people there survived through farming, logging, or mining. His routine consisted of the same repetitive work every day, going to sleep as soon as it got dark, a world completely devoid of excitement. Suddenly, Alpha is startled by a shout announcing that the lord of the estate is arriving. A procession of knights approaches in formation across the fields of the domain. At the front of them is Sigma Leonias, the Marquis, mounted on his white horse. He enters the estate gates escorted by his knights. According to Alpha, his new master is considered one of the greatest swordsmen in the Empire. According to rumors, Sigma accomplished great military feats during the Gulf campaign 3 years ago, and because of this, he was granted the title of Marquis of the Empire's northeastern front. Leading his elite troops, he advanced alone into the center of the enemy army and brought back the enemy general's head as a trophy. It is said that Sigma killed more than 1,000 soldiers with his own hands, decapitating most of them with a single strike. His merciless sword did not only terrify his enemies, even his own allies gave him a nickname, the Cold-Blooded Decapitator. Despite his fame, it is said that he knows nothing about politics and only thinks about the sword, leaving the administration of the territory in the hands of his subordinates, or at least that is what the malicious rumors say. Back in the present, Sigma returns on his white horse, welcomed by the estate's workers. One of the workers calls Alpha and asks him to take the Lord's horse to the stable. He promptly replies that he is already on his way. Alpha respectfully bows before the Marquis, who looks at him with a cold expression. Alone, he thinks that the man is frightening and remembers that being at the bottom of the hierarchy, he has never even exchanged a word with the Lord. Suddenly, the horse starts sniffing him, and Alpha, annoyed, asks it to stop fooling around. The other stable boys laugh at the scene, saying it is surprising that the noble Sifnas took a liking to him. Alpha complains that the beast is trying to bite him, and one of them jokes that the horse probably mistook him for one of its servants. From a distance, Sigma silently watches the scene. A little later, he heads toward the mansion with one of his knights. The squire asks if something is bothering him, and Sigma simply replies that it is nothing. Back at work, Alpha carries the harnesses, thinking that compared to his past life, this world is boring, but he admits that he likes being there. The world of gambling was filled with betrayal, lies, and intense emotions, but he had always been alone. Now surrounded by kind-hearted people with food, a bed, and a body already accustomed to hard work, his life is different. Enjoying the small changes in himself and in the people around him, Alpha lives each day to the fullest. Perhaps, he thinks with a smile, this is what a real life is supposed to be. He feeds the horses in the stable, at peace with his routine. A colleague releases him for the rest of the day, and Alpha excitedly thanks him before running off. He climbs onto the roof of the house, scaling the tree with agility. Once at the top, he sits down and opens a thick book he carries with him. His greatest hobby there is reading, and he immediately defends himself, saying that anyone who finds it strange should keep quiet. This book, he reveals, is something he brought with him after his reincarnation, the history of the rise and fall of the Empire. It is a precious record of the Sylvester Empire, from its founding 300 years ago to its eventual destruction, covering the origin of the imperial family, noble bloodlines, changes in borders, and the situation of neighboring nations. Since the entire history is recorded there, Alpha has deep knowledge of the culture and civilization of that world. But the most important part, according to him, is precisely the destruction. In just 3 years, the Empire will be invaded by a neighboring country and completely devastated. And what is even more astonishing is that the book also records events that have not happened yet. Among its pages, there is even a brief mention of the Leonias family. Due to financial ruin, Lord Sigma will supposedly surrender his title and territory to his own uncle and leave for war as an ordinary knight. He will fight on numerous battlefields for the already disadvantaged Imperial army until he becomes known as the strongest man on the continent. But the neighboring country will demand Sigma's life as a condition for a ceasefire, and the Empire will agree. The strongest swordsman on the continent will meet a tragic end at the guillotine, not on the battlefield. After that, the neighboring country will invade again and the Empire will finally fall. Alpha grumbles that it is terrible. Angrily, he concludes that since they could not defeat Sigma in battle, they use politics to kill him, and calls the Empire, which sacrificed him to save its own skin, absolute garbage. Thinking deeply, he realizes that this peaceful life has only a few years left, and considers that perhaps it would be better to leave that place and move to another country before the situation gets worse. Still on the roof, Alpha hears the sound of swords echoing in the distance, coming from the training grounds. Down below, Sigma trains alone, repeatedly striking the air at dusk. Alpha comments to himself that the Marquis has been training since early morning, sparring with his subordinates and conducting cavalry drills, and the sound of the strikes can be heard even from up there, and even after a long horseback ride, he still insists on training alone. Smiling, Alpha concludes that Sigma really is a sword fanatic from head to toe. Watching the repeated strikes, he wonders how much training that man has subjected himself to since childhood, even though he could have lived an easy life as a nobleman's son. Instead, Sigma pushed his body and skills beyond human limits, crossed blood-soaked battlefields, and even in times of peace continues to punish himself to prepare for the next battle. Even so, Alpha thinks the title of strongest man on the continent that he will one day earn will only shorten his life. Quietly, he murmurs a call to his master, and his expression darkens as he thinks that it is simply too sad. He grips the book tightly in his hands. At night in the illuminated mansion, the routine continues. Alpha arrives carrying onions and is greeted with thanks. At the table, Alpha notices that dinner is especially elaborate today, and one of the maids explains that it is because they have a guest. Suddenly, a shout echoes through the hallway. "Lord Mido, this is going too far." And Alpha is startled by the tone of the voice. Intrigued, he wonders if that was Master Yoda's voice and heads out to investigate what is happening. He approaches quietly and peeks from behind a column in the mansion's hallway. Inside the room, the butler insists that the main cause of the financial crisis is the crop failure caused by the cold, but Yoda immediately argues that Sigma's administration is not to blame, and questions whether the real problem might be the Marquis's own uncle taking over the Chikuro mine, the family's only source of income that does not depend on the weather. The sound of fingers impatiently tapping on the table cuts off the questioning. While smoking a cigar, Mido Leonias, Sigma's uncle, makes a sarcastic remark. If a commoner is allowed to handle the affairs of his sword-headed nephew, it will not be long before he starts thinking he is a nobleman too. Furious with Yoda, he explodes, asking since when a noble commoner has the position to talk back to him. Yoda restrains himself, swallowing his irritation. Seeing the scene from above, he bows and apologizes, but Sigma, sitting at the table, calmly asks the butler to step back. While secretly spying, Alpha recognizes Mido as the younger brother of the former head of the family, a parasite who used illness as an excuse to escape the war and lives off the Leonias family's wealth. He wonders who that man thinks he is, acting with such arrogance. Pointing a finger at his nephew, Mido accuses Sigma of neglecting his duties, saying that is why a mere butler thinks he has the right to be insolent. Sigma simply replies that he has no excuse. Alpha becomes furious, thinking that Mido is the insolent one here. Sigma explains that, as Lord Mido himself said, the territory is suffering from a cold wave, and it would be extremely difficult to obtain the capital he is requesting. Mido mocks him, saying this only proves Sigma's inexperience as a lord. Even with the poor harvest, all he had to do was collect the usual taxes. Sigma argues that if he does that, the people will starve. Mido fires back that it does not matter if peasants who cannot pay their taxes die, since collecting taxes is a lord's right. Sigma replies that if the people die, tax revenue will only decrease. It is not that simple. Hidden away, Alpha becomes even more irritated, thinking that this bum has never managed a territory and has no right to lecture anyone. Mido sneers, saying that a brat like him talks as if he knows something, then changes the subject, returning to the main point. Pointing at some documents on the table, he argues that since the territory is struggling, this business opportunity is even better. According to him, the initial investment would pay itself back several times over, giving Sigma plenty of money to distribute to his dear peasants. Sigma remains silent, suspicious. Smiling maliciously, Mido offers to lend his own capital, assuring him that they will simply formalize a contract and there is no reason to worry. Watching from a distance, Alpha feels that something about all this is starting to smell wrong. Upon examining the contract, Oda is shocked. It is a debt taken out within the Leonias family itself, and he points out that the money Mido claims to be lending actually already belonged to the family. Enraged by the accusation, Mido explodes, calling Yoda a dog and shouting that he dares to be insolent toward him once again. Stammering, Yoda apologizes, but insists that what Lord Mido is proposing is simply. Before he can finish, Mido interrupts him with a shout, saying that a commoner has no right to interfere in a conversation between nobles, and orders Sigma to cut the butler down on the spot. Sigma falls silent, stunned by his uncle's request. Mido insists that if his nephew refuses to obey, he is mocking him, his own uncle. Irritated, he claims that the servants behave that way because Sigma despises him so much, and accuses Sigma of having no intention of listening to his words. With his eyes red with rage, he goes even further. He says that refusing his request would also mock the memory of his deceased brother, and swears that he will not accept it under any circumstances. Hidden away, Alpha breaks into a cold sweat, thinking that things have gotten ugly. Nobles never back down after saying something like that, and he fears the butler will pay dearly for it. Sigma lets out a restrained sigh before finally speaking. "Uncle," he says, and Mido is startled by the change in tone. Sigma gives in, he accepts the offered loan and asks them to forgive his servant's insolence. Yoda, shocked, can only murmur, "Master." Radiant with delight, Mido grabs his nephew by the shoulder, saying that he finally understands. After all, he only wants to help the young head of the family, and reveals that he already has a contract prepared, worth 2,000 gold coins. Analyzing the proposal coldly, Oda calculates that amount would have been more than enough to comfortably overcome last year's crop failure, since 2,000 gold coins are equivalent to the entire annual output of the Chikuro mine. According to Mido, they will use the territory as collateral, but there is no reason to worry. The import business has the support of Countess Steroth of the Kingdom of Milia, guaranteeing its success, and he asks Sigma to sign right there. Peeking in, Alpha is startled, guaranteed success, that he thinks is the oldest trick in the book. Tense, he wonders if this is the moment, the exact instant when, according to the book, Sigma would hand over his title and territory to his uncle because of financial ruin, and whether this debt is the true cause of everything. Sigma is already holding the pen, about to sign the contract. Euphoric, Mito laughs loudly, shouting that with this investment, the finances of the Leonia's territory will be secure for the next 10 years. The pen brushes against the paper just a few millimeters away from the signature. At that moment, Alpha bursts into the room, shouting, "No, no, no." With his arm raised, he yells that an investment is just a gamble, and that there is no such thing as a guarantee. Mito is perplexed and can only ask who the hell he is. Sigma remains silent, caught off guard by the sudden interruption. Standing before them, Alpha becomes a little nervous, unable to speak immediately. Inside, Alpha panics, thinking that barging in like this will only make things worse for his master. It does not help at all. Suddenly, a strange light completely surrounds him. He becomes confused. A screen appears before him. Bet chip system, bet mission. The text is clear. Cancel the loan contract. What will he bet? Perplexed, Alpha stammers, unable to understand what is happening. A ghostly blue projection shows the scene of the three men still gathered around the table. He stares at the floating chips before him in disbelief. Bet chip system. 3 betting options appear: head, butt, and arm, all marked as possible wins, along with values in coins. The system asks what he will bet. Alpha deduces that the system must be connected to his past life as a gambler, even though he does not understand what is happening, and wonders if this means he has to bet a part of his own body. Ruling out his head betting, that would literally mean being decapitated by the decapitator himself, far too risky, and also ruling out his butt, refusing to offer that to an assassin. Only one option remains. By elimination, the arm is left. Losing just one instead of both would make all the difference to his life. Tense and sweating coldly, he finally makes his decision. "All right," he shouts, raising his fist. "I bet my left arm." The options on the screen respond with win, 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 as streams of light begin forming around his raised fist. The chains coil tightly around his wrist, crackling with energy. On the screen, the mission is confirmed. Bet chip system, bet mission, cancel the loan contract, begin. With the chains still wrapped around his arm, Alpha understands. He only needs to sabotage that loan by any means necessary. He thinks confidently that as long as it is called a bet, he has a chance. Mito, furious, demands that Sigma explain how he intends to take responsibility for his servant's repeated insolence. Calmly, Sigma asks whether a promissory note would not be enough as an answer. Mito rages that he is not talking about that. He wants to know what the brat's punishment will be, pointing directly at Alpha. Running forward, Alpha throws himself onto the floor, loudly begging for forgiveness. Still prostrated, he claims that they had no intention of offending him and blames his master's own ignorance for the comment that slipped out. Sigma and Iota exchange confused looks, unable to understand what Alpha is doing, while Alpha says that this is exactly what one should expect before the great Lord Mito. Still on his knees, Alpha begins flattering him, praising his wisdom in reducing risks and increasing returns, a reputation, he claims, known even among the common people. Mito swells with pride, saying that for a commoner, Alpha actually understands the subject quite well. Alpha exaggerates his praise even further, saying that in a world where a 30% success rate is already considered excellent, Mito's plan appears to have a 60 to 70% chance of success. Inflated with pride, Mito boasts that his predictions are not that weak. He guarantees 8 or 9 out of 10. Alpha reacts as if he has heard a divine blessing, continuing to call Mito an investment genius, a great sage, a true god of wisdom. Absorbed in the praise, Mito thinks to himself that commoners have treated him with distance for years, but he has finally found a true supporter. Suddenly, Alpha changes his tone and raises a finger. He warns that Master Sigma does not understand any of this. Confused, Mito can only let out an huh. Alpha explains, even with 8 or 9 chances out of 10, there is still a 10 to 20% risk of failure, and if Sigma signs without understanding that, sooner or later there will be trouble. Moving closer, he whispers confidentially. Sigma could later claim that this was not what they agreed upon, declare the contract void, refuse to pay, and in the end try to eliminate Mito by force. After all, his master is nothing more than a sword fanatic who understands nothing beyond that. Sigma understands nothing of what they are talking about, while in the background, Lord Mito agrees with what Alpha has just said. With his fist raised, Alpha boldly declares that he will bet his own left arm to prove to everyone what an 8 or 9 out of 10 chance really means. Alarmed, Yoda asks what Alpha thinks he is doing. Around the table, 5 red boxes are arranged, Yoda standing behind them, Sigma and Mito seated on opposite sides, and Alpha in the center, conducting the game. He lifts one of the boxes, revealing a copper coin inside, and explains that it is a kind of game of chance where they must guess which box contains the coin. Normally, he says, only 1 out of every 3 boxes is a winner, but this time, to match the 8 or 9 out of 10 chance Mito has been boasting about, 4 out of the 5 boxes will be winners. Only one is a d. He does the math right there. Mito has an 80% chance of getting it right on the first try, but there is still a risk of picking the dud, and if that happens, they simply restart and try again, raising the probability to 96% over 2 attempts. Practically impossible to lose. Bowing with false modesty, Alpha jokes that calling it a game of chance is merely a formality. In practice, it is free money, a common pastime among commoners to lift their spirits under conditions where losing is nearly impossible. Mido holds his face, amused, calling it mere trivial entertainment, but inside he is surprised. Did the boy just perform that complex calculation in his head on the spot? Curious, Mido asks what will happen to Alpha's left arm if he himself chooses the winning box, as compensation for his earlier insolence. With a stern gaze, Alpha replies, cut off his left arm. Intrigued, Mido thinks to himself that dismissing a servant like this would bring him no benefit. He reflects, a whipping on the buttocks is the standard punishment for an insolent brat, but that is far too cliché. Cutting off an arm, on the other hand, would serve as an excellent example for the peasants. They would all come to revere and fear him. Alpha realizes with a chill, so that's what head and butt meant. Mido asks Sigma if he has any objection. Impassive, his nephew is already preparing the blade and replies that since it is Alpha's own request, he sees no problem and that he will cut off the arm immediately. In a panic, Alpha screams that he ended up choosing the highest risk option, that this is shameful, and begs his master not to talk so casually about cutting off his arm. Laughing awkwardly, he tries to regain his composure. He assures them that losing is practically impossible, but if he loses twice in a row, he only asks for mercy. Mido reluctantly agrees. Relieved, Alpha celebrates. Alpha announces that they can start right away, and the four gather around the table with the boxes. Alpha's hands move rapidly between the boxes, shuffling them at high speed. Watching closely, Oda realizes in disbelief. He switched the positions of the boxes. After finishing the shuffle, Alpha spreads his arms and invites Mido to choose whichever box he wants. Mido scoffs, saying there is no need to take such entertainment so seriously since they say his luck surpasses even that of his deceased brother. Beneath his smile, Alpha quietly provokes him. If luck is the only thing he surpasses his brother at, wouldn't that make for a rather miserable life? Mido points to one of the boxes, that one. Tense, he opens it himself. The box is empty, the losing box. Satisfied, Alpha comments that the 8 or 9 out of 10 chance seems to have already failed. Furious, Mido slams the box onto the table and demands another round immediately. Alpha shuffles them again, beginning the second round. Mido watches, his eyes narrowed with anger. Sweating, Yoda notices he switched the boxes again right in front of everyone. Can Lord Mido see the trick? Alpha invites him again. Here, please make your choice. Suspicious, Mido notices that the brat's right hand moves strangely twice in a row. According to his calculations, the dud should be the second box from the right. Watching the 5 boxes, Oda silently reaches the same conclusion. Mido adds that the boxes beside it also seem suspicious. Determined to avoid anything suspicious, he chooses the box on the far left, the same one that was the dud at the beginning of the round. He picks it up with a confident smile. He brings it close to his face, tense and sweating coldly. Smiling, Alpha asks him to open it himself. The box is empty, the dud once again. In shock, Mido shouts that this is impossible. Alpha casually discards the box. Smiling, he laments, even 96% is no guarantee. Mido's face twists in despair as he faces the reality of the situation. Thus, Alpha's arm escapes being cut off, and Yoda, satisfied, begins to imagine that, while they are at it, they might also be able to free Sigma from the loan contract. But Mido demands another round. The others react in surprise. Irritated, he argues that the first attempt does not count since he chose randomly. Alpha is startled. Indignant, Yoda protests that this is completely absurd. Mido argues back, claiming that this is merely a test of luck, and it would be a shame to ruin a good investment opportunity because of bad luck. He proposes that they try one more time so they can finalize the contract on good terms. He finishes with a sly, calculating smile. Confronted by Sigma's silent gaze, Mido confirms that the left-arm bet still stands. Alpha accepts and, already leaning over the table, announces the beginning of the third round. This time he himself reveals aloud which boxes are winners and which one is the dud, shuffling everything immediately afterward in front of everyone. Finishing the movement, he straightens up, serious, and waits. Mido, however, begins sinking deeper into doubt. He realizes too late that this was never a simple test of luck. It was a psychological war designed to force him to choose the wrong box. He remembers the first round. The young man had placed the losing box very close to his right hand, the easiest one to reach. In reality, that was the greatest risk he took, because all Mido had to do was lean over and choose another one, and the game would have ended right there. In the second round, he remembers, he was forced to be cautious after falling for the losing box on the right end, and realizing that it seemed to have moved to the second position was also part of the trap. More than that, placing the losing box at the far left at the beginning of every round was pure manipulation. His choices had been limited from the very beginning. He thought he was choosing freely, but in reality, he had been pushed toward the left the entire time. Alpha finishes shuffling and stands up, extending his hands over the boxes. Now, please make your choice. Mido thinks it seems like the losing box is in the middle this time, but he decides to ignore that impression. Mido continues overthinking. After the impression the young man left, it becomes difficult to choose the left or right end, which means that perhaps the second or fourth box is exactly what he wants Mido to choose. Staring at the 5 boxes, he wonders whether he should risk choosing the left end again as he did before. Breaking into a cold sweat, he mutters a curse under his breath. The more he thinks about it, the more he feels like he is falling straight into the trap. Hunched over in his chair with his hand on his chin, he sinks even deeper into doubt under Sigma's watchful gaze beside him. Mito turns to his nephew and asks if Sigma was also watching, demanding that he reveal where the losing box is. Yoda and Alpha are startled by the unexpected request. Indignant, Yoda protests that this is completely unreasonable. Mito counters by asking why he cannot rely on his own nephew's luck in this investment, insisting that Sigma speak. Sigma remains silent for a moment. Finally, he answers, according to his calculations, the losing box is the fourth one from the right. Yoda falls silent, worried. Euphoric, Mito celebrates. He knew it was that one, the fourth box, the one that had left the weakest impression during the last 2 rounds, was exactly the one he was about to choose. He deliberately avoids the fourth box and picks another one, telling Alpha that it was a fine trick, but that he would pay dearly for trying to deceive him with the bet involving his left arm. Confused, Mito hesitates as he holds the chosen box. A sinister laugh echoes. It is Alpha, wearing a wide and frightening smile, inviting him to open it. The box opens, empty, once again the losing box. Mito screams in despair, asking why. Yoda jolts at the result. With his arms raised, Alpha taunts him. What an unbelievable twist. The chance of drawing the losing box 3 times in a row is only 1 in 125. Still laughing, he exclaims that they should forget about 8 or 9 out of 10. That is less than 1%. Extraordinary bad luck has fallen upon Mito. In a dark voice, he declares that it would not be an exaggeration to call it a bad omen. Perhaps dark clouds really are forming over you in this business, Lord Mito. Trembling, Mito stares at his own hand in shock, unable to understand why it keeps choosing the wrong box every time. Sigma shows a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Standing up and adjusting his coat, he addresses his uncle. He apologizes but considers the investment deal cancelled from that moment onward. Mito tries to stop him. Wait, Sigma, you can't do this now. Sigma, however, stands by his decision. Without the favor of the gods, he says, their success would be impossible, and he admits that he had been careless, almost forgetting his responsibility as a lord to protect the people's livelihood. In shock, Mito can only murmur through his tears that this cannot be happening. Back at the table, Oda turns to Alpha, demanding to know where he learned that trick capable of deceiving even Sigma's own eyes. Laughing, Alpha denies it. It was no trick at all. Both the Master and Lord Mito had guessed correctly. Intrigued, Yoda lets out a huh. So it really was cheating, he concludes. Alpha explains, of the 5 boxes, only one actually contained the copper coin. Yoda does not understand there had clearly been a sound coming from the other boxes as well. Alpha points to his own wrist. That was where the sound had come from. He reveals the mechanism hidden inside his sleeve, a small extra box attached to his arm. With a smile, he explains, even an empty box makes a sound if he shakes it with that left hand. Yoda is surprised by the revelation. The simpler the trick, Alpha explains, the bigger the blind spot it creates. After all, no one there knows the tricks of a legendary gambler. He even does the math, making Mito think that 4 out of 5 boxes were winners when there was actually only one was already enough to condemn him to defeat. He even feels sorry for Lord Mito, but with a 1 in 5 chance, 3 attempts already gave him almost a 50% probability. It wasn't such a bad gamble after all. The true objective, Alpha reveals, was to ensure that he would never choose the one box that was actually the winner. Impressed, Yoda lets out a ho. Alpha explains it round by round. In the first, all he had to do was place the winning box at the farthest end from Mito. In the second, he placed it at the opposite end, where Mito had already failed before, and in the third, he risked placing it on the left again, a riskier move, but one he had calculated carefully. Yoda insists, asking once again where he learned such cunning tactics. Suddenly, he remembers. So Yogi's victory earlier that same day had also been Alpha's doing. With his eyes closed and a shy smile, Alpha admits that he normally does not do this sort of thing, only when someone suffers a loss that is too great. Smiling, he concludes, there is no fun in letting grudges grow between friends. Sitting with formal posture, Sigma thanks Alpha for his work and sincerely reinforces that he has his gratitude. Caught off guard, Alpha can only murmur a "you." Before leaving, he simply replies that there is no need to thank him. The door closes behind him. Walking down the hallway, Alpha thinks in disbelief. He never imagined he would be thanked by the very Lord of Decapitation himself. He smiles to himself, satisfied. If this changes his master's fate even a little, he thinks, then it was worth it. The feeling is wonderful. As he walks, he plays with a coin, tossing it into the air. Suddenly, a blue light surrounds him. Startled, he screams as he feels his body being consumed by energy. A box of light appears beside his head. The system screen reappears and Alpha complains irritably, "You again." The system confirms, initial chips received 80. Already at the door, he hears Oda call his name once more and turns around, curious. Alone in the hallway, Alpha stares at the screen again, trying to understand. So he earned chips by betting his own arm. He was deceived in the best possible way, but in the end, everything worked out. The system displays the rules. Bet the initial chips on future gambling missions to increase the total. If the chips reach 0, the game is over, in other words, death. Accumulated chips can be exchanged for rewards. Alpha reflects, so all he has to do is increase these 80 chips, and he is already curious about what kinds of rewards are available. But then he freezes, alarmed, after rereading a word on the screen. Death. Before him appears the list of available rewards. Skills such as item appraisal, status appraisal, swordsmanship, terrain appraisal, hand-to-hand combat, weather forecasting, archery, spearmanship, and even advanced swordsmanship, each with its own price in chips, along with other options that are still unknown, marked only with question marks. Curious, Alpha mutters, "Oh ho, oh ho, oh ho." As he analyzes the options, biting his finger, he smiles mischievously. This, he thinks, is starting to get interesting. The next day, the routine at the estate continues as normal, with the workers carrying out their daily tasks. Pushing the hay cart, Alpha grumbles, exhausted. This is terrible. He doesn't feel like he got any rest at all. The night before, he had become so addicted to the betting chip system that he spent hours researching every detail of the system. Sitting on the ground and analyzing the glowing screen, he murmurs that this is dangerous. Because time stops while the system is active, he has no idea how many hours he actually spent messing around with it, completely caught up in his excitement. And even after the system shut down, he was too excited to sleep, repeating quietly beneath the covers that it was incredible. Back at work, rake in hand, he wonders which reward he should exchange for first. Everything seems interesting. A colleague calls him. The head butler is asking for him. Alpha is startled and immediately replies that he is coming. In Oda's office, he hears the news in surprise. He's going to be Lord Sigma's personal assistant. Oda confirms in the morning he will continue working in the stable as usual, but during the day he must accompany the Lord at all times. After dinner, he only needs to attend to him when called. Alpha readily accepts. Looking at his own clothes, he awkwardly asks if it is really okay to stay dressed like that with his work clothes dirty. Yoda hands him clean clothes and tells him to change first. The training field stretches out before him. Soldiers in formation, archery targets, and practice dummies riddled with arrows. Already changed, wearing a white shirt and holding a wooden sword, Alpha walks along grumbling, unable to understand why he is there practicing swordsmanship. A blonde female knight approaches with a smile, asking if he really is Lord Sigma's assistant. She introduces herself as Knight Visconti and teases him. Does he intend to just stand there watching while the Lord trains? Alpha protests. Isn't an assistant's job to take care of his master's personal needs? Laughing, Visconti informs him that he will receive instruction in the knight's orthodox swordsmanship and that he should feel honored. Training begins. Visconti shouts orders: straighten up, stretch, bring your feet closer, while Alpha awkwardly struggles with the wooden sword. Alpha begins swinging the sword, starting his arduous training. After some time, he is already on the ground, exhausted, with his hands sore and red. He groans in pain, asking if he will have to go through this every day. This is absurd. Leaning against a fence post, resigned, he thinks to himself that he intends to escape before being dragged into the war. He has no time to waste being trapped in a job like this. Elsewhere on the field, Sigma knocks down one of the other recruits with a precise strike. Disarmed, the young man surrenders. Without wasting any time, Sigma calls for the next one while the other recruits watch nervously. With his arms crossed, Alpha watches everything from a distance, wondering what that sword fanatic is up to. Inside a carriage on the way to another region of the territory, Yoda warns that by accompanying the Lord, Alpha will also be present for administrative matters. That day he says he wants Alpha to learn about the domain's actual situation. Alpha agrees, not quite understanding what is expected of him. From the top of a hill, the two observe fields, the village, and a mill in the distance. Yoda explains, as Alpha probably already knows, last year's cold wave devastated the region's crops. In scenes of the village, an exhausted farmer works the land. The harvest yielded less than half of what it normally would. A woman carries heavy buckets of water, and according to Yoda, many residents can barely get enough food to eat every day. Grimly, Oda reveals that the prices of oil, medicine, and other goods purchased from outside have skyrocketed, making life even harder for the people, and that, according to what he has heard, some families have secretly sold their own children to slave traffickers. Alpha falls silent, his expression heavy. He thinks, selling their own children. To reduce the number of hungry mouths, the weakest are always the first to suffer. A dark memory invades his mind. A child curled up alone in a filthy room. The selfish circumstances created by adults always end up pushing their children into misery. In that memory, he himself, still a boy, appears sitting against a wall, defeated, and later, leaning over a sink and drinking water. In another scene, he is scavenging for food in the trash when, for no reason at all, a cook grabs him by the hair. Grinding his teeth, Alpha thinks to himself that no matter the era or the world, nothing ever truly changes. With his back turned, Oda asks if something is bothering him. Alpha quickly denies it, saying it is nothing. Still thinking about the matter, he takes a guess. If tax revenue is less than half of normal, then it is only natural that the Lord is facing financial difficulties. Yoda interrupts him, no, that's not it. Confused, Alpha can only let out a huh. Yoda reveals that Lord Sigma has not collected any taxes from the people. Shocked, Alpha cries out, what? He protests that it makes no sense. Yoda explains that part of the revenue is normally paid as tribute to the Empire. And since this is a border territory, the Marquisate is also responsible for guarding the border and exterminating monsters, a huge military expense that is also normally covered by taxes. But this year, all of that came out of the Lord's own pocket. The Marquis's household is already on the verge of bankruptcy. Alarmed, Alpha argues, why would his master pay for all of that out of his own pocket? The Empire certainly did not exempt him from the tribute. The right thing would be to collect taxes from the people as usual. The answer echoes in Sigma's own words. The people are my family. According to the Lord, helping his own family when they are suffering is the most natural thing in the world. Alpha falls silent, unable to react. He thinks in disbelief. A nobleman would really do something like that. The doubt deepens bitterly even when there are parents who abandon their own children. Yoda places a hand on his shoulder, saying that apparently the two of them, he and Alpha, are also part of Lord Sigma's family and that because of this they must serve him loyally. Alpha pulls away, still lost in thought. Alone, he stammers quietly, "F family." Yoda, hearing him from a distance, looks back. As they turn the corner, they find a supply wagon arriving, surrounded by excited villagers. It's that. This is amazing. Intrigued, Alpha wonders what is wrong with that man. Yoda merely mutters, "That is." As they approach, they find a merchant pot-bellied, wearing a purple turban, arguing loudly with the villagers. He claims that the shortage of everything has caused the prices of oil and salt to rise again. One of the villagers protests that even so, it makes no sense for them to cost 3 times more than last month. Irritated, they say that it is ridiculous. At the back of the cart, jars of oil, sacks of salt, and bread are piled up. A girl approaches pleadingly. Her father is sick and needs medicine. She begs him to sell it at the old price. The merchant mocks her, asking if she is trying to convince him with tears, and tells her to give him a break. Embarrassed, she stammers that was not her intention. Yoda interrupts him with a simple "Hey." He confronts the merchant. He asks if he is not from Lord Mido's merchant company, and questions how the prices could have risen even further since the increase at the beginning of spring. Beside him, Alpha thinks bitterly to himself that this is the old bastard's lackey. The merchant tries to evade the question, implying that it belongs to Lord Sigma. Yoda does not let it slide, reminding him that Mido's company was granted an exclusive license to import and sell goods from other domains on the condition that they would not make excessive profits on essential goods, and asks if he intends to break that agreement. With a dark smile, the merchant defends himself. It is a lot of work to bring these goods from so far away, and calling it excessive profit is unfair. He then tells them to provide their own supplies. The merchant sarcastically assumes that the Marquis can somehow gather enough money to buy them. Yoda is shocked by the response. Climbing back onto the cart, the merchant dismisses everyone contemptuously. If they do not like the prices, nobody is forcing them to buy anything. The villagers weakly protest, asking him to wait. As he leaves, he provokes them further. They will be back in 5 days, and they should enjoy that time while they can, getting a taste of what it is like to be without what they need. The cart rolls away creaking. One villager bitterly mutters that it is pure arrogance. Watching everything, Alpha puts the pieces together. So this is how the old man finances his merchant company, with money from the mines. Yoda is startled. The old man. Alpha confirms it is Lord Mido. Tense, Alpha reflects the Marquis has no money in the treasury right now. What they need is something that can serve as capital. Night falls over the mansion, accompanied by the distant hooting of owls. Inside a dark shed, Alpha frantically searches through boxes, knocking everything around him over and startling a rat that scurries past. Gritting his teeth, he grumbles furiously, "That damn merchant and that damn old man. He will make sure both of them regret it." 5 days later, the merchant's cart returns along the road toward the village. Confident, he boasts, he bets those poor fools have already learned their lesson during these 5 days. In the end, they will have no choice but to buy at whatever price he decides to charge. Laughing, the merchant revels in his own satisfaction. Today, he thinks he will exploit them even more. The cart arrives at the village, surrounded by the villagers. He announces, displaying the merchandise, "Come closer, everyone. The goods you've been waiting for have finally arrived. A little expensive, that's true, but feel free to buy." Exhausted, the villagers look at one another. 90 silver coins for a single jar of oil. Is he trying to steal every last coin they have left? Among them, a girl insists on the medicine. The merchant taunts her, saying the price will only keep rising and that now is the best time to buy. She protests. 30 silver coins only buy 7 days worth of medicine. What is she supposed to do after that? With a disgusting smile, he maliciously suggests that it would be a shame to waste such a pretty girl. Perhaps she could make a fortune through night work. She recoils in horror, unable to say anything. Suddenly, the merchant stops. In the distance, a carriage approaches along the road, drawing everyone's attention. Alpha, wearing a vest and bow tie, enthusiastically waves from atop the vehicle, shouting, "Hey!" The carriage arrives and the villagers run toward it in surprise. Yoda jumps down with a box in his arms, elegant in his suit. "Sorry for the delay." Alpha and another young man climb down right behind him, excited. The distribution begins. Oda hands medicine to a girl, saying, "Ria, here's a whole month's supply of medicine for your father. I hope he gets well soon." And calls out to another villager, "Rivi, 2 jars of oil for you." The merchant watches everything in shock, breaking into a cold sweat. Around them, more villagers celebrate as they receive their orders. Sacks of salt, cotton fabric, and even some good beer, all delivered with broad smiles. The merchant approaches Alpha, terrified, and the merchant himself blurts out, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Trembling with rage, he shouts, "Why are they giving merchandise away for free?" Sitting calmly atop the carriage, Alpha shrugs. They simply provided their own supplies, exactly as he himself had suggested. Sweating, the merchant stammers, "Where did they get the money to buy all that? The Marquis' household shouldn't have any funds left over." Alpha smiles broadly and menacingly without answering. We return to 5 days earlier. The voices from that argument still echo in the memory. "I'm not some decrepit old man. It's Lord Mido." Along with Alpha's own thoughts, the Marquis' household has no money at all, and what he needs is some initial capital. Determined, he thinks about trying to use that and raises his hand. System activate. A blue light completely surrounds him, with translucent figures spinning around him. He closely examines a reward exchange screen from the bet chip system. He chooses item appraisal, costing 5 chips, and confirms the exchange, this one. The system displays a notification. He has just acquired the item appraisal skill. To activate it, he simply has to say the words aloud. The effect allows him to look at an item for 2 seconds and see its detailed information. Smiling, surrounded by imaginary coins and jewels, Alpha thinks that simple as it may seem, this is still a Marquis' estate. If he searches the storage rooms, he should be able to find some rare treasure. The mansion stands silently beneath the crescent moon. But inside one of the storage rooms, he ends up lying face down among the boxes. There was absolutely nothing. Standing beside a door, discouraged, he laments that he had expected to find at least some piece of art or forgotten accessory, but thinking about it, it made no sense to leave treasures lying around where the servants themselves were constantly walking. He continues down a dark hallway, the furniture glowing as it is scanned by the skill, nothing valuable in sight. Outside, walking alongside the livestock pen, he grumbles that the place is far too plain for a noble estate. There is not even a flashy decoration. At the very least, he expected to find some gigantic vase decorating a corner. Sitting in a corner of the stable, resigned, he admits that he really is not going to find any treasure in a place like this. Suddenly, he stops. An old animal hide hanging from a hook begins to glow, marked by the appraisal symbol. The status appears on the screen: rank B, demonic boar hide, rarity B, selling price of 30 gold coins. Description: hide from a demonic boar found only near the central mountain range of the continent, with excellent resistance to cold and cuts. Special effect: additional resistance to earth attribute magic. Stunned, Alpha stammers, 30 gold coins for that filthy hide. He jumps in surprise, his hair standing on end from shock. Open-mouthed, he can only murmur, this is. Around him, a flood of appraisal indicators begins appearing, floating throughout the stable, each glowing in different colors, revealing that the place is hiding far more treasure than he ever imagined. Thinking about it, even a child playing video games knows that monster materials are worth money. It is common sense. But in this world, things work a little differently. Here in the Leonia's domain, where hunting monsters is an everyday task, monster carcasses are nothing unusual. The meat is toxic and has to be discarded. The other materials are durable but too hard for fine processing, and since they do not look good, they end up being treated carelessly. The outer hides become winter clothing or house patches, while fangs and bones replace iron in the manufacture of farming tools. Every family has some of these items at home, passed down from generation to generation. In the Empire's capital, however, far from monster territories, these same materials are treated as luxury goods and sold at exorbitant prices. That was when Alpha had the idea. He convinced the entire territory to donate their monster materials, convinced the head butler to let him travel, obtained a letter of introduction from the Lord himself, and taking turns driving the carriage with Miguel, traveled through the night. Already exhausted, leaning back in the carriage while Miguel drove ahead sweating, he sold everything to the merchants in the capital and used the money to stock the territory with all those goods. Back in the village, sitting calmly atop the carriage, Alpha hears the merchant angrily demand to know where he got the money to buy all of that. Mockingly, with his tongue sticking out, he taunts him. It's a trade secret, as if he would tell him, idiot. The merchant reacts in shock. Before an excited crowd, Alpha firmly announces, from now on, all purchases and sales with other domains will be placed under the direct control of Lord Sigma through the newly established Yoda Trading Company. Beside him, Yoda himself is shocked, unable to understand why they used his name like that. Desperate, the merchant runs after the departing carriage. Wait, what is he supposed to do with all the merchandise he already has? Calmly, Alpha replies, he was the one who refused to sell it, wasn't he? Crying in the rain, the merchant laments that his business is ruined. What excuse is he going to give Lord Mido now? In silence, Alpha's face is hidden in the shadows. He tells the merchant to beg them not to mess with him. Coldly, Alpha declares, a true business leaves its customers satisfied. Only then can a trade route truly be sustained. Scenes of the villagers show that no one there is seeking to satisfy their own greed. They are simply families pushing themselves to their limits, rationing every meal, caring for the sick, and trying to survive together. Surrounding the merchant, the villagers themselves confront him. What kind of business makes people like them suffer this way? Furious, Alpha points his finger. What he did was exploit their weaknesses, that is extortion. Kneeling over him, he shouts, never dare call yourself a trading company again. Soaked and trembling, the merchant collapses in terror amid the horses neighing. From above, the carriage is seen being unloaded. Yoda addresses the crowd, explaining that he keeps an exact record of how much the monster materials everyone donated earned, and that there is still plenty of money left from the sales. They only need to let him know whenever they need something else. The villagers cheer, and Alpha announces that the Yoda Trading Company will charge a fixed 20% commission. Everyone enthusiastically agrees, thanking them for their tremendous help. Alpha gives a victory sign, smiling broadly. He lets out a hearty laugh, satisfied. Watching from a distance, Yoda comments to a colleague that Alpha is surprisingly accustomed to this kind of situation. The other, intrigued, asks what is wrong with that young man. Later that night, inside the mansion, Yoda reports to Sigma, who is seated at the table, and that is how the situation was resolved. Sigma simply replies, understood. Yoda predicts that they will receive a formal protest from Lord Mido. Coldly, Sigma dismisses the concern. He does not care, his own uncle caused all of this. Sigma praises him for his work and dismisses him. Yoda bids him farewell with a bow and leaves. He stops for a moment and looks back. He asks Sigma, could the master have already foreseen this outcome when he decided to make Alpha his servant? Sigma then stops what he is doing. Without beating around the bush, he comments that he is not devout enough to receive divine revelations. Bowing, Yoda apologizes for the foolish thought. Suddenly, Sigma admits he knew that, being who he was, Alpha would never simply sit around doing nothing. The mansion is silhouetted against the sky beneath a crescent moon. Meanwhile, Alpha sleeps soundly, scratching his belly and snoring loudly, and that is precisely what Yoda decides. They will simply have to put him to work even more. The scene opens onto a peaceful path through the forest, with a snow-covered mountain in the background, bathed in light. A ripe red apple hangs from a branch. Alpha reaches out and picks it. Biting into the fruit, he grumbles with his mouth full. Even so, standing on the branch chewing, he complains that there really is absolutely nothing there, at least not in the Leonia's domain. Looking over the village fields below, he continues eating contentedly. Ah, that's delicious. Sitting against the trunk, he reflects. The money from selling the monster materials is enough to survive for a while, but it does not truly solve the financial problem. Seriously, he considers, if things are left as they are, there is no telling when that bastard Mido will try to take the Marquis's domain for himself. A dark vision fills his mind, Mido laughing in front of a guillotine amid flames, and he thinks that somehow he needs to change his master's future. The previous night, he had once again checked the bet chip system. Since the item appraisal skill had proven so useful, he decided to test some other options. Counting his chips, he evaluates. 75 remain. He wants to keep 50 as an initial reserve for the next bet. Pointing decisively, he declares, a skill capable of turning the tables all at once. This is it. On the screen, two options stand out: terrain appraisal for 15 chips and archery level 1 for 40. According to its description, the terrain appraisal skill is a practical tool that identifies properties, conditions, and types of rocks and geological formations. Excited, Alpha runs through the forest, dreaming big, the day he discovers a vein of gold or an oil well. A rabbit watches him pass. No, he does not even need that. Gemstones like rubies or emeralds would already be more than enough. Smiling, his eyes shining, he imagines diamonds, rubies, and gold bars. Well, a silver mine would be the more realistic expectation. He climbs a rocky outcrop. Standing at the top, he gazes triumphantly at the forest and mountains around him. Suddenly, he is already fighting a wild snake. A bird's nest appears peacefully among the leaves, contrasting with the chaos. Already exhausted, lying face down in a clearing among tree stumps, he grumbles. He found absolutely nothing. Sitting against a tree with his head in his hands, he despairs. Did he just waste 15 chips? And on top of that, he remembers he ended up trading them for some unnecessary things. Back on the tree branch, scratching his head, intrigued, he lets out a howl. In the distance, a monstrous creature, a colossal wolf, advances on a white-haired woman dressed in traveling clothes who reacts in shock to the attack. Growling, the furry, many-eyed creature advances threateningly. The woman finds herself cornered by the monster. Terrified, she grits her teeth. What should she do? There is nowhere left to run. Raising a small amulet, she desperately prays, Supreme God Mercury, extend your hand of salvation to me. The beast approaches, opening its enormous fangs right in front of her. In close-up, its jaws gape open, about to attack. She screams, shielding her face with her arms. Help, someone help me. Suddenly, something strikes the monster's head, piercing through it and spraying blood. The creature recoils, wounded and staggering from the impact. Stunned, the woman can only react with a huh. Heavy footsteps land on the ground nearby. It is Alpha, holding a thick branch as a weapon, leaping toward the monster. The creature's single red eye glows with fury, blood dripping from its fangs. Furious, Alpha shouts while swinging the branch, "AAH, you bastards, don't underestimate humans." Sweating, his face tense, he mutters to himself, one more hit. His hand becomes enveloped in a whirlwind of energy, level 1 wind magic, the air spin skill. The monster roars again, bloodied and enraged. Giving up on the attack, the monster retreats, leaving Alpha and the woman behind. Catching his breath, Alpha turns around. Phew, looks like it gave up. To himself, Alpha thinks that the wind magic he learned just for fun turned out to be more useful than he expected, but he acknowledges that he does not have enough strength to actually kill a demonic wolf. If he had continued fighting it head-on, he would have been in serious trouble. He turns to the woman. Oh, right, are you hurt? Ecstatic, she thanks him profusely, raising her hands toward the heavens. Thank you so much for saving me, oh Supreme God Mercury. Alpha simply stares at the scene without reacting. He awkwardly tries to correct her. It was not some god who saved her, it was him. But she, still with shining eyes, completely ignores him. Yes, I thank the divine will of the god who sent you to me. Giving up, Alpha simply says, well, whatever, and asks why she was alone so deep in the mountains. That was clearly dangerous, wasn't it? Still ecstatic, she raises her hand. I am not alone, we are always accompanied by God. Aside, Alpha grumbles dejectedly. She's a hopeless case. He cannot even have a normal conversation with this woman. Unfazed, she teases him. Hey, don't you think you're being a little harsh with me? Caught off guard, Alpha explains that she sounded so artificial, as if she were acting something out. She admits playfully, wasn't that the ideal behavior for a pure and virtuous nun? It works perfectly with the faithful back in the capital. She comments that this is exactly why the country bumpkins on the frontier are so. He is stunned. Wow, that's pure regional prejudice. The two exchange laughs. Still laughing, she teases him. Alpha responds with a smile. I thought God's love was the same for everyone. Composing herself, she finally introduces herself. "Thank you for saving me, I am Shida." Alpha introduces himself as well. "I'm Alpha, I'm glad you're okay." Suddenly, Shida notices something. Alarmed, she exclaims, "Oh no, your hand is injured." He minimizes it. "It was just a scratch from breaking the branch. She does not need to worry." She insists she cannot simply ignore it. Concentrating, she channels healing magic into his hand. The wound closes before his eyes. Amazed, Alpha exclaims, "Wow, incredible, the wound healed completely." With her hands clasped, Shida seriously asks him to keep that a secret, please. Confused, Alpha asks if she is talking about the magic. She confirms that she is. Alone, he still wonders why when a voice interrupts him. "Lady Shida." A group of armed knights emerges from among the trees, coming toward her. The scene changes to the imposing facade of a large mansion. Inside, in a formal room, Sigma receives an elderly monk seated before him, with Yoda standing beside him and Alpha near the door. A knight stands behind the religious man. Sigma asks if he is returning from a pilgrimage to the divine peak of Euremia, and observes that it is rare for someone like Lord Costello, Archbishop of the Central Temple, to personally accompany the journey. Laughing cheerfully, the old monk denies that it is unusual. As Sigma knows well, the pilgrimage to the Holy Land is mandatory for everyone who serves the Central Temple. Costello continues. Upon learning that Shida, a nun he has known since childhood, would be going on a pilgrimage, he felt like visiting the Lord of these lands for the first time in more than a decade. Sigma responds dryly. His devotion remains as firm as ever. Costello suggests that Sigma should also visit the imperial capital someday. His Majesty misses him. Downcast, Sigma replies that he is merely a useful fool suited only for war, too ashamed to show his face there. A caption reveals the divine peak of Euremia in the Linea's domain is the highest mountain on the continent, known as the Stairway to Heaven, revered as the Holy Land where the supreme god Mercury once descended. Costello recalls, even though it was a journey on foot accompanied only by an old monk like himself, he thought bringing 5 knights as escorts was excessive. But then they were attacked by a pack of demonic wolves, and he nearly lost his beloved girl. One of the knights, blonde with his face covered by a red scarf, explains, it was their first time facing magical beasts, and that was why they let some of them escape. They bow before Alpha, thanking him once again. Even though it was merely a coincidence, they are grateful that he was there at that moment. Embarrassed and sweating, Alpha replies that it was an honor to be of help. Watching everything from a distance, Yoda reflects to himself, escorting an archbishop is the duty of the temple knights. His eyes fixate on the knight's crest, a golden emblem shaped like a phoenix. But that crest, he realizes, belongs to the Imperial Guard. Suspicious, Yoda wonders, why would Lord Costello and the Imperial Guard accompany a simple nun on a pilgrimage? Could it be that the real purpose behind all of this is to inspect the Marquis's domain? Unaware of the suspicion surrounding him, Costello continues praising Sigma. Only now has he truly realized the weight placed upon the Marquis's domain. It is thanks to the tireless efforts of his army that the realms of humans and magical beasts remain separated. Enchanted, Shida explains, even among the lay followers of the faith of Mercury, many dream of making at least one pilgrimage to the divine peak of Euremia in their lifetime. After all, there is nowhere else where one can feel God's presence so closely. Curious, Alpha silently reacts, paying close attention to the conversation. She continues, the problem is that this journey becomes quite difficult when one has to be willing to risk their own life. The knight beside her adds that there is no guarantee that ordinary mercenaries will actually be useful when it matters. Laughing loudly, Costello points a finger. Exactly, it is thanks to the elite order personally trained by Sigma that the invasion of magical beasts from the north remains under control. Suddenly, Alpha speaks up. Excuse me, Archbishop Costello. Smiling broadly and rubbing his hands together, he announces that he has a small proposal, if that's all right, of course. Alarmed, Oda whispers a warning. Alpha, I don't know what you're planning to say, but you really shouldn't make your ulterior motives so obvious. Laughing awkwardly and waving his hands, Alpha apologizes, assuring them that the proposal will be extremely advantageous for both sides. Excitedly pointing upward, he blurts out, how about the Linea's domain provide full support for the sacred pilgrimage of Mercury's faithful? He details the plan. The Yoda Trading Company, under the direct control of the Marquis, already sends regular shipments to the capital. All they would need to do is recruit interested pilgrims to travel along with them. They could start with a capacity of around 10 people at a time. Within the territory, escort knights would accompany the group as protection against magical beasts, offering a paid service that would safely guide them all the way to the divine peak of Euremia itself. And there's more, they would provide lodging and meals, promising the faithful a safe and comfortable pilgrimage from beginning to end. Raising his arms excitedly, Alpha reveals the name of the package. Welcome to the Marquis's domain, the absolutely safe Divine Peak Euremia tour. Costello, resting his chin on his hand, is astonished and murmurs that this is the kind of proposal they could only dream of. Could something like this really be possible? Around them, everyone exchanges silent glances. The blonde knight stares intently at Alpha. Shida watches attentively as well, and Yoda gives him a thoughtful sidelong glance. Sigma, who had remained silent until then, finally speaks. Yes, as a monster surveillance patrol, it is perfectly possible for knights to accompany them. The room erupts in celebration, everyone becoming excited at once. Practical as ever, Yoda immediately pulls out a notebook. In that case, they need to discuss the budget for a 2-day, 1-night stay with 2 meals and a night escort. The approximate cost would be. Moved, Costello expresses his gratitude. They are truly grateful, after all, for a believer. This is a once-in-a-lifetime achievement. Excited, Alpha is already planning the next steps. He will ask the Yoda Trading Company to prepare special dishes using local products, as well as souvenirs to commemorate the pilgrimage, and he intends to consult Old Yogi and the others about it. Thus begins the Liania's Domain tourism attraction project. Watching from afar, the blonde knight comments to Sheeta that the Marquis's servants are, so to speak, quite peculiar. She quietly laughs, agreeing that they really are unique. Night falls over the mansion. On the training grounds, with a shout, Alpha strikes at Visconti. Visconti blocks with ease and warns, too weak. Smiling, she instructs him. A downward strike needs enough spirit behind it to ensure a kill with a single cut, but if he misses, it leaves a huge opening that could prove fatal. Sweating with his teeth clenched, Alpha concentrates even harder. From a distance, Sheeta silently watches the training. Visconti announces the end of the session. All right, training's over. Exhausted, Alpha collapses to the ground, panting as Sheeta approaches. He explains that he spent the entire morning running around organizing the pilgrimage, so he had expected to be excused from sword training. Still panting, Alpha murmurs that he needs to take it seriously, otherwise it would be disrespectful to the person teaching him. Watching him silently, Sheeta quietly admits he's incredible. He always manages to exceed everyone's expectations. She hesitates, murmuring, compared to him, she is. Alpha notices the change in her tone and asks if something happened during that pilgrimage. Sheeta falls silent for a moment. Finally, she confesses, actually, she is one of the candidates to become the saint. Surprised, Alpha can only let out an illustrated page explains. The saint is the most important existence, capable of receiving oracles from the supreme god Mercury. It is said that only one is born every 100 years, receiving divine grace and performing miracles, or at least that's what is written in the history of the rise and fall of the empire. Sheeta explains, this year marks exactly 100 years since the birth of the last saint. 10 candidates were chosen from among the young nuns. Impressed, Alpha exclaims, really, that's quite an honor, isn't it? She shakes her head, not exactly. In a somber flashback, she reveals that she was chosen solely because of her lineage. Her family is a powerful noble house with a long history. Surprised, Alpha thinks, so Sheeta was the daughter of nobles. Back in the flashback, her voice grows heavy. She is the family's failure, sent to the central temple because she was considered a burden. The Archbishop has known her since she was little and has always encouraged her, saying that she will surely be the saint of this generation, but she herself cannot imagine that happening. In another flashback, standing before the temple steps, she was told that if she personally visited the divine peak, an oracle might descend upon her. It was at the Archbishop's recommendation that she embarked on that pilgrimage. Kneeling before the altar, she pleads, Supreme God Mercury, please grant me an oracle. But with an empty voice, she admits that she couldn't hear God's voice. Alpha simply murmurs, I see. She opens up even more. For a long time, she felt like an existence that nobody wanted. She thought that if even someone as useless as herself gave everything she had, perhaps God would accept her. In a flashback to her family, her parents turn away coldly. She explains that she thought that maybe, just maybe, her life could change from that point on, that the very parents and family who had abandoned her. With tears welling in her eyes, she confesses, perhaps they would welcome her back with affection if she became a saint. Forcing a smile, she laughs at herself. It was only a small hope. There was no way someone like her would be chosen in the end. Her smile falters and tears begin to fall. Alarmed, Alpha interrupts her. Wait, what the hell are you talking about? Surprised by his reaction, Sheeta can only say, huh. Seriously gesturing as he speaks, he declares, all right, listen carefully. Everyone has a decisive moment, a life-or-death moment that becomes a turning point in their life. Curious, she asks, did you have one too, Alpha? He answers categorically, of course I did. In a dramatic flashback, he finds himself face to face with the greatest enemy of his life, a card game, aces on the table, stacks of chips. If I win, it's paradise. Would have been hell if I lost. It was quite a gamble, he confesses, with a revolver pressed against his own head. He reflects, you can't even predict what will happen 1 second from now, but in a situation this important, you can't simply leave your fate to luck. To win, he explains, you need an absolute condition. Curious, Sheeta asks what that condition is. He answers, it's a spade ace spins between his fingers, grabbing your own destiny with your own hands. Around him, the crowd celebrates his victory at the table. Seriously looking at Sheeta, he declares, the only person capable of changing her future is herself, not a god. She falls silent, absorbing his words. He continues, besides, in a situation where your entire life is at stake, you can't simply say, I had a little hope. Any god who chose someone with that kind of mindset to become a saint would have to be out of their mind. Hurt, Sheeta protests. He didn't have to put it that way. Composing herself, she suggests that since she is returning to the capital tomorrow, why don't they go together to the Euremia altar and try one more time before leaving? She reacts in surprise. What? He then teaches her enthusiastically, and then tell God with complete confidence, just choose me as your saint already, that's your job, just like that. Sheeta laughs at this. Walking together, she asks what he does when he loses one of those bets where his own life is at stake. He answers playfully that it's a good question when that happens. He suddenly runs off, shouting, "You yell, cancel everything that just happened, and run like hell." Laughing, Sheeta runs after him. "What is that? That's cheating." The two run together across the field laughing. She thinks to herself, "I understand I was only worrying about my own problems without even trying to have the will or determination necessary to become a saint." Alone with leaves blowing in the wind, she concludes, thinking about what she can do for this world and putting it into practice. That is the true path of someone who aspires to become a saint. Whether she is chosen or not no longer matters. Standing before the imposing mountain that dominates the Liania's domain, she gives thanks. She is happy to have come all the way there and gives thanks to the divine will. Suddenly, a light completely envelops her. A voice echoes, "Child of mercy." The light explodes around her as the voice continues. "The one who will be both the beginning and the end, coming from a distant land to calm the horrors of war and bring harmony to the world. Destiny has already been decided. The name of this person is..." Suddenly, something catches Alpha's attention. Frightened, Sheeta wonders what she just felt. Was that an oracle? He runs toward her, concerned. "Hey, what's wrong?" Her face remains in shock. The vision continues. "The name of this person is..." But the revelation is interrupted right there. Alpha only reacts in confusion. What happened? The scene cuts to the mansion beneath the clear sky. Hurried footsteps echo through the corridors. Mido appears and says, "I heard. They say an archbishop from the central temple is visiting." Loda asks where they heard that rumor. Mido replies that there isn't anything in that domain he doesn't know about. They should hurry and take him there. Soon, Mido spots Alpha. "Ah, you are." He bows with false courtesy. "A fine day to you, Lord Mido." Mido recoils in horror. "Don't come near me, you god of misfortune." Laughing, Alpha teases him. "Oh, come on, Tilda, you don't have to be so cold toward me, Tilda." Internally, he reveals that in his previous life, he was a legendary gambler, feared in underground casinos as the god of misfortune. No one should know that he is Tui Shiba, but he thinks, laughing to himself, that even in this world, he ended up being treated as a god of misfortune. Sweating, Mido thinks to himself, his bad luck is warning him. Getting involved with that kid will only bring trouble. At the top of the staircase, Sigma appears, asking what all the commotion is about, and as he approaches, he addresses his uncle. At that very moment, Costello, Sheeta, and the knight descend the stairs to meet them, and both Mido and the others are startled. The rumors were true. Mido approaches Costello, greeting him enthusiastically. My, Archbishop Costello. "Welcome to our border domain. I am Mido, Sigma's uncle." Embarrassed, Costello tries to refuse such excessive courtesy. No, for a humble monk like me this is." Mido insists, boasting that there is no more devoted believer in the faith of Mercury throughout the entire Liania's domain than himself, and that he has even made generous donations to the central temple. Costello awkwardly admits that it is admirable. Mido takes advantage of the opportunity. He hopes to one day obtain an audience with His Holiness the Pope and asks whether the Archbishop could arrange it for him, promising to personally reward him. "I beg you, please." Suddenly, Mido pushes a handful of gold coins into the Archbishop's hand. Shocked, Costello steps back. "I can't accept this." Watching the scene from afar, Alpha is startled. That old man is blatantly trying to bribe a cleric. Sigma approaches, putting an end to the commotion. "Uncle, enough with the nonsense." Mido pretends to be surprised. "Oh, Sigma, you were here." Beside him, Alpha grumbles incredulously. He had been there the whole time. Suddenly, Mido's son bursts into the room, shouting, "Your Eminence." Raising his arm with great pomp, he introduces himself. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Joro, Mido's son." Sweating awkwardly, Costello can only murmur, "Ah, what a fine air." Beside him, the knight mutters quietly, "He's so loud." Mido boasts about his own son, patting him on the shoulder. He is his proud heir, highly skilled in both academics and martial arts. Excited, Joro declares that he will do everything he can not to bring shame to his father's name. Watching everything with disdain, Yoda thinks. The lack of modesty between that father and son duo is astounding, and whispers to Alpha, "Alpha, it's written all over your face, try to hide it a little." Mido continues boasting that Joro's swordsmanship is second only to Sigma's throughout the entire domain. Impressed, Costello reacts, "Oh, skill second only to that of the Decapitator, the most renowned warrior in the Empire." Embarrassed, Costello mutters, "It was just a slip of the tongue. Decapitator slipped out by accident." Curious, Alpha whispers to Yoda, "Is his swordsmanship really only second to the Master's?" Without changing his expression, Yoda quietly replies, "No one seriously challenges Lord Joro since he isn't even part of the Marquis' army. Obviously, things would become complicated if someone actually defeated him." Alarmed, Alpha reacts to something in the background. What's that? He notices the blonde knight and Sheeta approaching and remembers. Oh, right. Discreetly, he turns to Sheeta. Some annoying guests have shown up, but they still need to return to the Euremia altar one more time should they find a way to sneak away. Calmly smiling, Sheeta replies, "No, everything is already fine." Surprised, Alpha can only say, "What do you mean?" Smiling, Sheeta warmly thanks him. "Thank you, Alpha." Embarrassed and sweating, he thinks that he doesn't really understand, but if everything is fine, then that's fine, alright. Joro notices the two of them curious. He asks who the young woman is. Costello explains that she is the nun who accompanied them on the pilgrimage and asks Shida to greet Lord Mido and Lord Yoro. She readily agrees. Radiantly, Shida introduces herself. I am Shida, a nun of the Central Temple. May God's blessings be with Lord Mido and Lord Yoro. Yoro falls in love instantly, his eyes turning into hearts. He grabs her hand, moved. I have received your feelings with all my heart. Alarmed, Shida reacts, wait. Amused, Mido teases his son. What is this, Yoro, already looking for a wife? Gahaha, looks like he really likes her. Costello reprimands him seriously. You shouldn't touch someone who has devoted her purity to God so freely. Mido gushes, praising his son in front of Shida. He has a very promising future. Laughing loudly, he declares that one day he will have Yoro rule the Liania's domain. But before that, he intends to place him among the temple knights to give his name even more prestige. Shock spreads through everyone around them. Oda becomes furious, Alpha is alarmed, Shida is startled, Costello is uncomfortable, and the blonde knight narrows his eyes. Furious, Alpha can only think, this guy. Enraged, he concludes, what nerve, he just declared right in front of everyone that he intends to take over as head of the family. Shida reacts, speechless and unable to believe what she heard. The faces of Sigma, cold and composed, and Mido, furious, meet in a true clash of ideals. On the defensive, Mido retorts, what, if you, a single man, die in battle, I am the one who succeeds you as lord, and naturally I would pass that on to my son Yoro. It's simply a precaution for emergencies. Yoda rebukes him, this isn't an appropriate subject to discuss in front of our guests from the capital, not to mention the misunderstanding caused by treating the temple knights with such disdain. Mido nods reluctantly, I know. Bowing awkwardly before Costello, Mido apologizes, Lord Costello, I apologize if I offended you. I came rushing here specifically to ask you to recommend my foolish son to the noble temple knights. Uncomfortable, Costello only replies, I understand. Costello clarifies that unfortunately the temple knights are not accompanying him on this pilgrimage. Intrigued, Mido then asks who that knight over there is. The blonde knight replies that he belongs to the Imperial Guard due to particular circumstances. Mido reacts in shock, what? Up close, Oda concludes, so that's what it was, they are directly connected to the Imperial family. Ecstatic, Mido celebrates. He never imagined that the path to the Imperial Guard could open specifically for his own son. This must be the true will of God. He's already planning ahead. With the Archbishop's recommendation and the commanders together, Yoro's entry would be guaranteed. Embarrassed, Costello can only murmur, oh well that's. Mido continues insisting. Yoro is a powerful warrior, perfect for protecting the Imperial family, and orders his son to thank them as well. Yoro obeys, moved. It is an honor greater than he deserves. Beside him, Costello mutters that the situation is getting complicated. Furious, Alpha grits his teeth internally. This is going too far. Those two, father and son, are a truly shameless pair. Suddenly, he is startled. A blue screen begins glowing around him. The system announces, betting mission defeat Yoro. Which competition will you choose? Surprised, Alpha reacts. Oh, an event was activated right here. The options appear, dice game with double odds, marathon with quadruple odds, fencing duel with 8-fold odds. Sweating, he hesitates. A servant challenging the Lord's own cousin to a duel like this out of nowhere is insane, but he almost got into a fight with the guy anyway. Resigned, he sighs, well, there's no choice. Let's see here. He considers dice would be a guaranteed victory, but the odds are only doubled. While in a fencing duel there is no way he could win, he concludes then that leaves the marathon. He pauses, thoughtful, until an idea comes to him. Would it be possible to use that? His appraisal ability activates, illuminating the stairs, paintings, and corridors around him, mapping everything. Back to the conversation, Loda intervenes in alarm and says that Lord Mido can't make such outrageous demands of their guests. But to everyone's confusion, someone praises him. Wow, just as expected of Lord Mido, what a wonderful proposal. Delighted by the unexpected praise, Mido boasts with a laugh, Nufufu, isn't it, when you leave things to me? He furrows his brow, intrigued. Laughing, Alpha leans on Mido's shoulder. Since they're already at it, they should have Yoro take the entrance exam right now. Mido reacts tensely. Delighted, Alpha simply repeats, let's do it. Mido panics, backing away, don't come near me. From above, the entire mansion and the training ground in the background can be seen. In the courtyard, several warriors gather in formation for the fencing test. In front of the troops, the blonde knight stands beside Yoro and Alpha. He announces, very well. Let us begin the Imperial Knight's fencing test. Sitting and watching are Sigma, Costello, Yoda, Shida, and Visconti, all paying close attention. Nervous and chubby, Yoro grips his sword. Challenger, Yoro Lianias, you pass if you defeat 3 opponents in a row. On the other side, Alpha is confident. The blonde man says, first match, the servant Alpha. Nearby, Visconti and Sigma watch quietly, one smiles slightly while the other silently observes. Intrigued, Yoda and Shida wonder why Alpha is so confident. Neither of them knows the answer. Alpha smiles, confident in himself. Before the fight, the knight knelt in front of Alpha and confirmed. He did not have the authority to decide the admission on his own, but was this really okay? Alpha assures him that it is. He only needs to conduct it as a fencing test. I'll go first. Worried, Costello warns that this probably won't end peacefully. Alpha counters, that depends on Lord Mido. Costello apologizes for getting him involved in that mess. Lota asks if Alpha really understands the situation. He said no one would fight seriously, but Lord Yoro is far from weak. Alarmed, Alpha reacts, what do you mean? Yoda explains he may not have real combat experience, but he trained properly, and with that physique it is only natural that he is strong. Shocked, Alpha protests. He should have been told that before. Lota says there is no way to defeat him after only a few days of training. Terrified, staring at the system screen, Alpha thinks he just bet 20 chips on the 8 times. He already spent 10 chips on a skill, counting on winning. If he loses now, he won't even be able to exchange the chips for any prize. Provocatively, Alpha asks, there is a knight capable of defeating this idiot's son, isn't there? Furious, Lota shouts back, it's Lord Yoro. Calmly, Alpha reveals that he has a plan in the worst-case scenario. All he has to do is prevent Yoro from defeating 3 opponents in a row. More importantly, he asks them to take care of the preparations afterward. He promptly agrees. Yes, understood. A succession of memories passes through the minds of those watching, that father and son have already crossed every possible line. Determined, Alpha declares, let's settle this properly. On the training ground, Mido settles into an ornate chair that he brought just for himself. Sitting down, he grumbles to himself suspiciously, why would a mere servant be interfering with the admission test? He doesn't trust that brat, he even brought a nice chair. What could he be planning? Trying to calm himself, he concludes, HMPH, I don't think he can pull anything off during a fencing test, besides. With a sinister smile, he thinks, if by any chance Yoro loses, he will have no choice but to resort to his last resort. With his back to the crowd of knights, Alpha reflects, even if the other knights prevent that idiot son from getting in, he can't simply give up and end things there. Holding the wooden sword, he braces himself, especially after betting 20 chips on that huge duel. In the name of the god of bad luck, he will fight with everything he has. The blonde knight raises his hand, very well, first match, begin. Yoro charges forward, delivering a powerful downward strike with all his strength. Shocked, Alpha reacts, he's fast. The clash of blades echoes, he barely manages to block the blow, forcing his arms to their limit. From outside, Costello and Sheeta shout together, Alpha. 2 other observers comment in surprise, he actually blocked that. Alpha finally understands, now I get it. The blows continue one after another, fierce and relentless. That young man is on a completely different level from what he imagined. This is the true strength of a swordsman who has trained seriously. Desperate, reaching out his hand, he thinks there isn't a single opening for his plan to work. This is bad, he can't see any chance of winning. Confident, Yoro gives Alpha a sidelong glance, raising his sword for another strike. Suddenly, Yoro gets distracted, embarrassed. Ah, Lady Sheeta. She's watching me so intently. Excited, he delivers a flashy strike. My brave and elegant sword. Smiling confidently, he boasts, heh, I'm feeling great today, so defeating 3 opponents will be a piece of cake. Straining his arms under the weight of the blows, Alpha grits his teeth while Yoro thinks disdainfully, this guy can't even counterattack. Convinced, Yoro mutters he only has a little trouble with the 3rd knight, Visconti. Closing his eyes, he prays, imagining Sheeta as an angel, but with Lady Sheeta's power of love, he will definitely win today. His face lights up with excitement, sweating from exhilaration. Meanwhile, Alpha calculates, observing his own sword. Intimidating a small guy like this might seem a little inelegant. That's it. Yoro approaches, boasting, Alpha, this admission test is happening thanks to you. Generously, he continues, so just this once he will let Alpha attack first, come at me. In ecstasy radiant, Yoro gushes, ah. Now that's true knightly spirit, Lady Sheeta, didn't that look awesome? Don't I look awesome right now? Smiling, Alpha accepts the invitation, haha, then I'll take you up on that. The two face each other, swords ready. Distracted, Yoro is already daydreaming. Today he will join the Imperial Knights. He is the strongest after Lord Sigma himself, and what if they suddenly appoint him squad leader? Suddenly the blades cross in an unexpected way. Surprised, Yoro reacts, what, why is he so close? A realization emerges, no matter how skilled someone is, it is difficult to deal with a technique they have never seen before, especially if it is Japanese swordsmanship. Smiling sinisterly, Alpha taunts from up close, thanks for going easy on me, loser. With a leap, he activates the skill level 1 swordsmanship and executes the move Rising Disarm. Yoro's sword flies into the air. In the stands, Costello, Lota, and Sheeta cheer, fists raised, excited by the fight. With his sword raised, Alpha advances for the final blow. Calmly watching everything, Visconti simply says, go Alpha. Yoro screams in terror, defenseless, as Alpha roars, putting all his spirit into a decisive downward strike. The final blow lands squarely. Yoro's face is struck, blood spraying from his nose and forehead. He is sent flying backward, collapsing to the ground, blood staining his shirt. In the stands, Mido screams in despair, impossible. The blonde knight raises Alpha's hand. Winner Alpha, the crowd erupts in celebration. Costello, Lota, and Sheeta shout together, yes. Satisfied, Alpha thinks to himself, spending 10 chips on that skill was worth it. The system screen reappears, bet chip system skill, level 1 swordsmanship, Rising Disarm, a Japanese fencing kendo technique used to break the opponent's stance, activated upon blade contact, sending the opponent's sword upward. Furious, Mido explodes. What are you celebrating for? He rages, a commoner injured a noble, this is a very serious crime. Calmly, the blonde knight counters, yes, but this is a fencing test, it was an unavoidable accident. Mido interrupts him furiously, don't be ridiculous. He continues, pointing at Alpha. That brat could have stopped before striking, but he knew Yoro no longer had a sword to defend himself and still drove the wooden sword straight into his face. Sweating, Alpha calmly admits that is exactly what happened. With his arms spread wide, Mido dramatizes that was clearly intentional, all of them are witnesses. Inside, he growls, surrounded by imaginary flames. That brat thinks he prevented Yoro from joining the Imperial Knights, but he won't let this go. Around them, the other recruits stay together with their arms crossed, tense at the scene. With his hand on his bloodied son's shoulder, Mido declares dramatically, if the blow had struck somewhere worse, his son Yoro would have died. In other words, this was attempted murder. Mido turns to his nephew, Sigma, that brat is your personal servant, isn't he? Were you the one who ordered this? Inside, he schemes darkly. He will use this opportunity to bring Sigma down once and for all. This is his last resort. He insists, staring at his nephew, how do you intend to take responsibility for this? From above, the entire scene can be seen. Alpha beside Visconti, Sigma and Costello sitting on the bench and the crowd gathered around them. Mido tells the commander that I am by no means expressing dissatisfaction with the result of the admission exam. Shrinking back, the commander responds, why yes, sir. Yoro appears with his head bandaged while his father complains. That commoner brat attacked the defenseless Yoro with a wooden sword. He used all the strength he had with clear intent to kill. Alpha simply responds that he is sorry. Costello and Shida, uncomfortable, exchange worried looks on the bench. Mido roars furiously. A commoner who commits an act of violence against a noble must face severe punishment. He continues, pointing at Sigma. But the problem is that the lord of this domain, Lord Sigma, refuses to act. Trembling with rage, he fires off. This is an act of rebellion against the class system itself, and by extension, a grave crime capable of bringing down the entire power structure of the empire. Turning to the Archbishop, he demands, don't you agree, Archbishop? Costello is startled. Sweating, he reluctantly gives in, why yes, that is true, you could say that. Alarmed, Alpha reacts. He steps forward, trembling, Lord Mido, Master Sigma has nothing to do with this, it's entirely my fault. Kneeling down, he pleads, please punish only me. The crowd watches tensely from a distance. Prostrate, gripping the ground with his injured hand, he insists, I'm begging you, please take my life to settle this. In tears, Shida can only call Alpha's name. With a kick, Mido throws dirt at Alpha. This is no longer something that can be resolved with the mind of a mere servant. Stay out of this. Alpha's face hardens as he sweats coldly. Pointing at the commander of the Imperial Guard and the Archbishop, who are seated nearby, Mido takes advantage of their presence. He officially proposes the removal of Sigma Leonidas from his position as Marquis. Sigma's face remains impassive. Yoda is startled. Around them, the other recruits react in shock. Mido demands that the two serve as impartial witnesses. He wants them to report to the Imperial family the facts he's about to present and seek their judgment. Do they have his word? The blonde knight and Costello respond, why yes, of course, if the proposal is legitimate, we will handle the matter according to Imperial law. The commander adds, if what you say is true, we will certainly report it. Raising two fingers, Mido declares, there are two reasons why Sigma is unfit to serve as Marquis. Two reasons. The first is exactly what he said before. By allowing a commoner's rebellious behavior to go unpunished, he turns the Empire's entire system of government into a joke. The second, an even more serious failure. He neglected the administration and tax collection of the domain, plunging it into a financial crisis. The people are left to their misery, and as a result, it is highly likely that he was not even able to pay the tribute owed to the Imperial family in full. With a wide, threatening smile, Mido concludes, the only person capable of fulfilling these obligations fairly is the former Lord's brother himself, Mido Leonidas. Therefore, he asks Sigma to approve the transfer of the title to him. Costello asks Sigma if he has any counterargument. Standing up calmly, he says, if I am judged. Turning around resolutely, he continues, as someone who does not possess the necessary qualifications to be a Marquis, I am willing to return the title at any time. Alpha is shocked. The recruits react in disbelief. No way. Claude, the vice-commander of the Marquis' army, falls to his knees, pleading, Lord Sigma, you can't. Please take back what you just said. Firmly, Sigma responds, no matter what position I am placed in, my determination to dedicate my life as the Empire's sword will never change. Radiant with triumph, Mido shouts at the Archbishop, did you hear that, Archbishop? He says he doesn't need the title or the Marquis' territory. Inside, he drools with satisfaction, heh. I knew a sword-obsessed fool like him would say exactly that. Resigned, Costello turns to Shida. If that is truly what Lord Sigma wants, there is nothing more to be done. With a repulsive smile, Mido thinks to himself, in politics, the only thing that speaks louder is a fait accompli. As long as you can pin the blame for a mistake on someone else and force everyone around you to recognize your own worth, that's all that matters. Inside, Mido convinces himself skill with a sword or an honest character mean absolutely nothing. In ecstasy, he shouts, finally, he himself will become the head of the Leonidas family. Laughing hysterically, he joins Alpha, who inexplicably laughs and celebrates alongside him. Suddenly, Mido stops, confused. Why the hell are you laughing? Looking up at the sky, Costello composes himself. Then, moving forward, let's determine whether Lord Mido is truly a man fit to be a marquis. He calls out Chief Butler Yoda. Yoda promptly responds, "Yes, sir." Mido sweats suspicious. Costello asks what the total income and taxes paid by Lord Mido are. Yoda responds, his revenue from the Chikuro mine gifted to him by Lord Sigma himself is approximately 2,000 gold coins and the taxes he has paid are 0. Mido protests, hey, what are you talking about? Costello continues, asking about the military records of Lord Mido and Lord Joro within the Marquisate's army. Yoda responds, Lord Mido was exempted from military service due to chronic illness he has had since childhood. Lord Joro also has no connection to the army and therefore has no experience whatsoever in military campaigns or the subjugation of magical beasts. Exploding with rage, Mido shouts, "Silence, Yoda, how insolent." Costello calms him down. They are only verifying the facts, so there is no need to get upset, and asks Yoda if there is anything else to report. Yoda reveals, the commercial company of Lord Mido, which received exclusive rights over the trade and sale of basic necessities, has been selling everything to the population for 3 times the normal price. Here is the company's ledger. Shocked, Mido blurts out, why the hell do you have that? Yoda explains, following the Archbishop's own instructions, they requested that the commercial company hand over its records. He points, look right there. In the background, Miguel appears holding the merchant by the shirt, raising his thumb and saying, Lord Mido, I'm sorry. Mido falls into absolute shock, choking and sweating profusely. Yoda continues, and finally, he raises a document. I present the promissory note written by Lord Mido himself regarding the loan offered to Lord Sigma. In a panic, Mido realizes in horror he ruined everything. He never recovered that note back then. While Yoda is about to hand the document to Costello, Mido rushes forward and screams in total panic. Wait, stop that. Calmly, Costello reads the document. Let me see, the creditor really is Lord Mido. And then Costello reacts in surprise. It clearly says here that the Leonia's domain was used as collateral. He turns to the commander. Commander, wouldn't that be a serious problem? The knight confirms, yes. This clearly violates Article 36 of the Imperial Law. The transfer of territories granted by the Empire in exchange for money or goods is strictly prohibited. A grim verdict echoes, that is grounds for the complete stripping of his noble status. Mido screams in despair, his dark silhouette dissolving into symbols of ruin. His face contorts in absolute terror, his mouth wide open and his eyes bulging. Costello addresses Lord Mido. They will formally report these facts to the Imperial family along with Lord Mido's proposal and await the results. He turns around again. There is one correction I need to make. Due to last year's poor harvests, almost all the nobles asked the Imperial family to reduce their taxes. However, he heard that the Leonia's domain paid its taxes in full. With his arms spread wide, Costello declares radiantly, Lord Sigma more than anyone else is undoubtedly one of the subjects in whom His Imperial Majesty places the greatest trust. The crowd erupts into cheers of approval. Visconti and Claude celebrate in the background. Sigma, composed, watches with satisfaction. Desperate, Joro tries to support his own father, who collapses. It's over. Father, please pull yourself together. Someone approaches, stopping directly in front of the kneeling Mido. Raising his eyes, Mido sees the shadow looming over him. Smiling, Alpha raises his thumb. That bold move of yours, betting everything on a major comeback, I didn't dislike it. Trembling, Mido finally understands in horror. You brat, don't tell me it was all you. Already walking away, Alpha replies over his shoulder. When the god of plague has you in his sights, your luck is already over, or so they say. A few days later, an official decree from the Imperial family stripped Mido of his succession rights and ordered the return of the Chikuro mine to Lord Sigma, in addition to a formal ban on any future involvement in the administration of the Marquisate domain. In a flashback, Alpha lands a direct hit on Joro, thus by defeating that idiot's son in a betting mission and earning 80 chips. Mido is dragged away by Costello. He continues, he ended up destroying that old man's plan to usurp the family's leadership. Peace was successfully restored in the Leonia's domain, but a series of changes was about to begin. At the gate, everyone gathers to say goodbye. Costello, the knight, Yoda, Sigma, Alpha, and Sheeta. Costello shakes Sigma's hand. Very well, Lord Sigma, we will see each other again in the Imperial capital. Sigma replies, yes, please convey my regards to His Imperial Majesty. Costello departs, waving cheerfully, escorted by the knights. Yoda, Sigma, Alpha, and Sheeta remain gathered, along with the blonde knight who also stayed behind. Alpha is puzzled. He realizes, alarmed, why is Sheeta still here? Excitedly, she explains, she arranged to stay at the Marquis's estate for a while. The knight adds he will also remain as her guard. Discreetly, Alpha whispers, is it for her training as a candidate for Saint? Sheeta confirms, yes, exactly. She thinks to herself, I'm sorry, Alpha, I can't tell you the truth. She wants to see the result of the divine revelation with her own eyes. Shrugging, he accepts. I understand, good luck with that. Excitedly, she thanks him, yes, thank you. At the training field, a new line of recruits forms. With one arm raised and his head bandaged, Joro loudly announces, I recently enlisted in the Marquis' army. I am Joro Leonias. He continues, shouting, "I've turned over a new leaf and I'll dedicate myself as a simple foot soldier. I hope to work well with everyone." Claude mutters quietly, "He's so loud." A caption reveals, "It seems Yoro's succession rights have been temporarily suspended, and his future status will be decided based on his actions within the Marquis' army." The commander instructs one of the officers, bowing, "Therefore there is no need to worry about Lord Yoro's social status. Train him rigorously, just like any other new recruit." Yoro spots Alpha. Surprised, he reacts, "Oh, Lord Yoro." Laughing awkwardly, still bandaged, Yoro apologizes. He's sorry about what happened during the test. "Ha, no hard feelings over the outcome of a fight, right? You don't need to worry about it." He continues, impressed. "More importantly, that was an incredible technique he used. It's impressive." Modestly, Alpha brushes off the praise. No, it was nothing. Thinking to himself that it was just a skill he got from the bet chip system anyway. Yoro grabs Alpha's hand and says, "Let's get along as comrades. I hope we can work well together." Hesitantly, Alpha accepts. Sure. He thinks this guy is surprisingly nice. During training, the recruits practice strikes with wooden weapons in formation, Alpha among them, sweating and determined. According to the history of the rise and fall of the Empire, the Marquis' army is apparently one of the most elite forces in the entire Sylvester Empire. According to the book, most of them are veteran knights who survived the Gulf campaign alongside their master Sigma, back when he was still only a count. In addition, they underwent hellish training and gained real combat experience by subjugating monsters, together forming an unmatched combat force. Even among them, Sigma's 3 right-hand men are at a completely different level of strength from the others. A seemingly powerful man roars, raising an axe. 3 knights charge forward together, shields raised. The clash is immediate, shields gleaming from the impact. The man grunts, HMPH. As the 3 are sent flying backward, a caption describes the heavy cavalry of explosive destruction, capable of breaking enemy lines with overwhelming physical strength. Up close, a knight with flame-colored hair rubs his chin, muttering, "Does he need another 2 guys?" He is introduced, captain of the first squad, Knight Organ. Another dark-haired combatant leaps toward him with a battle cry, HYYAH. On the other side, Vikonsti watches from the corner, raising her sword in defense, a sharp clack. A cutting strike slices through the air. Effortlessly, she repels the attack, completely disarming her opponent, the caption explains, wielding an infinite and ever-changing arsenal of sword techniques, the Flower Storm sword. Delighted, she spins the sword and exclaims, "Wow, I can actually use this properly." Her introduction appears, captain of the second squad, Knight Visconti. Watching from afar, alarmed, Alpha thinks, why can she use Rising Disarm? A hooded training dummy crackles with electrical energy. It is shattered with a single strike. Another intense confrontation unfolds, the caption describes, the ultimate form of solid defense and swift attacks, also skilled in martial arts, the lightning god of war. A scar-faced knight delivers a devastating blow, shattering the dummy's helmet. His introduction appears. Vice Commander of the Marquis' army, Knight Claude. Sweating and swallowing hard, Alpha thinks, each of them is a true monster, however. With his back turned, Sigma blocks Organ's axe with 2 swords. His sharp eyes gleam from behind his bangs, intense. He spins and delivers a blindingly fast strike at another opponent. He counters with a kick directly against Organ without hesitation. Visconti advances, bringing the wooden sword down with force, but it is easily deflected. Sigma blocks Claude's attack with his own blade. He leaps into the air, dodging multiple strikes at once. The confrontation becomes chaotic. Sigma faces all 3 simultaneously, blocking Claude and deflecting the attacks of Visconti and the other knight. In one swift movement, he disarms Claude and Visconti. The 2 are left incredulous. Sigma kicks Claude, knocking him to the ground. He throws a sword at Visconti and then leaps toward her, delivering a sideways slash that she blocks. Out of breath, Visconti stares at her cracked sword. From above, Claude can be seen completely defeated. Only Sigma and Visconti are still standing. Calmly, he ends it, "That's enough." Master Sigma is undoubtedly the greatest monster of them all. 1 month later, the imposing mountain of Euremia's divine peak rises in the distance. Along the road, a caravan of pilgrims travels on foot, escorted by a mounted knight. Along the way, residents comment excitedly, smiling and pointing. A caption announces the pilgrimage from the imperial capital to Euremia's divine peak had begun, and the domain was gradually overflowing with vitality. A family walks together. The son points excitedly, "Look, Mom, Euremia's divine peak is so close." The grandmother sighs, "Ah, what a blessing." The other adds, "We'll soon be beside the supreme god Mercury, won't we?" Ahead, a young guide leads the group, waving a flag. "We're almost there, everyone." And jokes, laughing, "Nobody can take their last breath right here, okay, haha." The great temple comes into view, the pilgrims approaching a statue of an angel. From above, an entire street of stalls can be seen set up near the temple. A vendor excitedly welcomes customers, "Welcome." Another praises his food, "It's delicious." Skewers grilling over the fire, stalls selling bread and fruit line the street as well. Alpha spots an old porter carrying goods on his back. "Old man, how's business?" Excitedly, he replies, "Ah, Alpha, everything's going great, thanks to you." He explains that, just when the pilgrims arrive exhausted from the climb, they find all these stalls filled with delicious food, and that's enough to loosen anyone's purse strings. Alpha comments, "I heard old Yogi's medals are also doing well." The porter agrees, "Yeah, the old man really is amazing." A caption reveals all the horseshoes in the stables are made and maintained by the blacksmith himself, Old Yogi. This iron metal, the caption reveals, was made using exactly his techniques. It is said that many pilgrims buy them as the perfect souvenir of this once-in-a-lifetime journey. Alpha admits, the only difficult part is carrying the merchandise halfway up the mountain, but the man becomes excited. It's not that bad. Just being able to bring joy to so many customers there in that isolated frontier makes me happy. Every one of them seems so pleased. Satisfied, Alpha reflects, I guess in the end everyone wins. The porter asks, everyone wins, I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. The Alpha smiles, right. Raising his fist, the porter laughs, hee so we're a win-win, how awesome. Alpha smiles, satisfied, as leaves blow around him in the wind. At night in the dormitory, the others are already asleep while Alpha remains seated, reading by lamplight. He reflects, the future in which Master Sigma would become an ordinary knight ruined by the financial crisis caused by that old man Mido has been averted for now. As for the financial crisis, he considers if the tourism industry continues to thrive, they can expect considerable stability. Leaning back, relieved, he admits, well, things turned out pretty well. He thinks he fulfilled in his own way the role he had at the Marquis' estate. But, with his face resting on the book, worried, he mutters, there is absolutely nothing he can do about the war with the neighboring country. According to the history of the rise and fall of the empire, the war with the neighboring country begins 6 months from now. It will last for about a year, followed by an armistice conditional on Master Sigma's execution, ultimately leading to the fall of the Sylvester Empire. 2 years and 7 months remain. Sweating, Alpha thinks, if the Master's future has already changed, he can't rule out the possibility that the rest of history could change as well. It is said that there was a minor skirmish on the western border. Alarmed, he wonders, what if the war starts earlier than expected? He sees Sigma in formal attire and declares, knowing what that sword fanatic is like, if he is deemed unfit to be a marquis, he will gladly give up his title at any time. He wouldn't hesitate to throw away his territory and title to go alone to the battlefield. Gritting his teeth, Alpha protests, that's what you call irresponsible. A succession of faces passes through his mind, all those he met there. He thinks, think about the feelings of those who would be left behind. Alone, he bites his nails anxiously, the book resting on his lap. He smiles awkwardly, haha, the arrogant gambler Tuishiba has lost his mind. Worrying about others has nothing to do with me. His hand grips the book tightly, trembling. Looking up, he decides, maybe it's time for me to leave. The very next day, the sky clears, birds flying in the distance, in other words, he thinks, while already training alone with the wooden sword. At first, should I ignore speed and focus on form and where to apply force? Visconti's voice confirms, exactly. With your build, Alpha, striking using only your arms will throw off your center of gravity. A diagram shows the difference. With a broken center of gravity, it takes time to recover your posture. With a stable center, you can immediately chain into the next attack. Visconti explains, that makes your next movement much slower. She details the grip and posture step by step. Visconti teaches him, once he masters weight transfer and the right timing for the grip, he will truly control the sword. Mastering the correct form will in practice make him faster. She delivers a dramatic strike, her hair blowing in the wind. The wooden sword shoots straight toward Alpha's face, his eyes widening in surprise. Visconti demonstrates the strike excitedly, like this. And she starts laughing, impressed. Alpha can only think, yes, no ordinary human could ever do that. Exhausted, he collapses to the ground, panting and drenched in sweat. Sheeta sits nearby watching. She praises him. Good job, Alpha. I don't know much about this, but I can tell you're getting the hang of it. Sweaty and smiling, he thanks her. Thanks for the compliment, even though you don't know anything about it. Exasperated, he complains. What can an amateur like me do among a bunch of monsters like these? With her arms crossed, Sheeta wisely replies, exactly. Recognizing your own weakness is the first step toward growing. The blonde knight interrupts. Calling yourself an amateur isn't fair. Your technique during the exam was impressive, and judging by your training strikes, you seem quite experienced. Embarrassed, Alpha waves his hands. Oh no, that movement was just me copying what I saw. It was luck. Surprised, the knight asks, what, you really only started learning swordsmanship recently? Scratching his head, Alpha modestly admits, honestly, I already feel bad just being allowed to train alongside real knights. Intrigued, the knight mutters, ho, if that's true, the boy has exceptional talent. Alpha suggests, Lord Saron, since you're going to be staying here for a while, why don't you join us too? Training alone has its limits, doesn't it? He replies, don't be foolish. It's already rare for an outsider to be allowed to observe the Marquis' army training, asking for such a brazen favor. Alpha interrupts, our lord isn't that closed-minded, you know. Suspicious, he asks, you really think so? Smiling, Alpha confirms, an exchange of techniques with the Imperial Knights, you're more than welcome. Saron decides, I'll ask him, and walks away toward Sigma and Iota. Watching him leave, the two comment, look at him, stiff as a board. Lord Saron really is a serious person, isn't he? Sheeta comments, pushing him over there was definitely the right choice. Saron formally greets Claude, Loda, and Sigma. Sheeta comments, everyone here in the Marquisate is so kind. Alpha reflects, strange, isn't it? Under the infamous Lord of Decapitation, everyone is thriving freely. He continues, actually Chief Butler Iota plays a huge role in that. He manages almost everything in the territory in place of the taciturn lord, precisely balancing when to be strict and when to be flexible. Of course, the lord deserves credit for trusting him while knowing exactly what he is doing. The residents and knights know this very well. Delighted, Sheeta observes him closely. You really love these people, don't you, the people of the Marquisate? Alpha reacts surprised. In the distance, Loda's voice echoes, Hey Alpha. He replies as he gets up, I'm coming. Turning around urgently, he warns Sheeta, I'm nothing like that. Confused, she only murmurs, Alpha. As he walks away, he thinks to himself, I need to get rid of this cheap compassion, it can't weigh more than my own life. Determined, he decides he will leave that place tomorrow night. Confused, he asks, what is the difference between a squire and a servant? They explain the duties aren't very different, but the status is completely different. A visual diagram explains, a squire belongs to the warrior class and directly serves a master. A servant is simply an employee who handles everyday tasks. They continue explaining, through hard training accompanying the knights on monster hunts and campaigns to gain combat experience, he would eventually become a knight, swearing loyalty to the Lord himself. Depending on his achievements in battle, he could even receive a piece of land. That is the honor and privilege of being a knight. Sweating, Alpha reacts, I see. Internally, he thinks, this is bad. He's planning to run away before the war breaks out. Yoda, placing a hand on his shoulder, announces, this promotion is all thanks to the recommendations of Sir Visconti and Sir Yahello. Make sure you thank them both. Bowing deeply, Alpha replies, I'm very grateful, but I have to refuse. Alarmed, Loda reacts, Hey, what are you talking about? He insists, opportunities for a commoner to become a squire are extremely rare. Alpha explains, to him advancement and success don't mean much. He's perfectly happy with how things are now. I'm sorry. He begins to walk away. Someone calls out, Hey, wait. Seriously, Claude asks, is there some reason behind this? With his back turned, Alpha replies, no, I just don't think there's anything more important than staying alive. Internally, he gets annoyed with himself. Why am I getting so bothered by this? Hurt, Claude looks at him closely. I thought you were someone who shared our ambitions, someone capable of standing by our side and supporting Lord Sigma. Was I wrong? With his back turned, Alpha remains silent as Claude stares at him. Furious, Alpha finally explodes. Well then, this Lord Sigma you people keep talking about, didn't he try to throw everything away just the other day? He continues angrily, how are we supposed to support someone like that? Echoing Sigma's own words, if I am judged unfit to be a marquis, I will hand over my title at any time. Alarmed, Yoda reprimands him. Alpha, be careful what you say about our lord. Alpha immediately fires back. Then who else is going to say it? Does any one of you have the courage to say it to his face? Around them, the other recruits exchange uncomfortable glances, murmuring among themselves. Pointing toward Sigma, who is walking in the distance, Alpha shouts, when our master decides to throw away his own title and territory. In tears, he screams, who's going to stop him? Yoda falls silent, stunned. You. Claude looks away. Alpha continues. Who is going to tell that infamous Lord of Decapitation not to make decisions on his own and abandon everyone? With his head lowered and tears falling, Alpha murmurs, who else is going to tell him that? Damn it, why am I crying? With her hands over her mouth, Sheeta whispers emotionally, Alpha. He wipes his face with his sleeve, sniffing. Suddenly, he shouts for Sigma Leonias. Pointing to the ground in front of him, Alpha demands, swear it right here. Sigma's face remains expressionless. Crying and furious, Alpha insists, swear that you'll never talk about giving up your title again. Swear that you'll never abandon this land. Around them, the other recruits stand firmly beside him. Pointing at himself defiantly, Alpha declares, you can execute me, you can decapitate me for this insolence, I don't care. With her hands over her mouth, Sheeta watches beside the blonde knight, visibly moved. Amid the flames, Alpha continues shouting, to the knights and the people who support you, swear it right now. Sigma's face remains unreadable. Horrified, Yoda reacts, Alpha, what have you done? Sigma extends his hand, my sword. One of the knights bows his head and replies, yes, my lord. He hands over the sword while kneeling. Sigma raises it high, dark energy crackling around the blade. Terrified, Oda murmurs, addressing the lord without his title and then spitting out such a huge insult. Death is inevitable. Sweating, Alpha swallows hard, preparing for the worst. Claude suddenly gives Alpha a little punch on the arm. He walks toward Sigma. Suddenly, Claude kneels not to attack, but to make a formal oath. Organ pats Alpha on the shoulder and wears a gentle smile. Then he bows alongside Claude. Next, Visconti ruffles Alpha's hair with a smile on her face. Around them, the other recruits gather around him, patting him on the back, one of them raising a hand for a high five. Joro hugs him tightly from behind, squeezing him affectionately. Finally, the entire crowd bows deeply before Sigma, while Alpha remains at the front with his back turned, everyone behind him revering the oath that has just been made. Raising his sword, Sigma declares, I, Sigma Leonias, swear before the heavens to share the same fate as the knights who swear allegiance, and to protect the peace of the people of this domain with my own life. The crowd roars in response, our swords and our loyalty. To our sovereign, Sigma Leonias, we swear forever. Stunned, Alpha remains standing amid the kneeling crowd. Smiling, Visconti looks over her shoulder. And you, Alpha, what do you say? Embarrassed, he stammers, Forcing him to kneel, he timidly shouts, "Okay, I get it, I'll become a squire." Already kneeling with the others, he resigns himself and thinks, "It looks like I really don't have a choice." This second life was a stolen deal from the beginning anyway. Up close, Sigma holds the sword resolute. Determined, Alpha declares, "I'll give everything I've got for you, master." A caption moves the story forward in time. Years later, Vice Commander Claude would reflect. It continues, perhaps it isn't correct to say that it was born that day since it had already existed before, but no one who was present would disagree. Our frontier knights, hailed as the strongest in the Empire, were truly born that day. The crowd lifts Sigma onto their shoulders, celebrating. The scene changes to a small fishing boat calmly floating on the water. Wearing a straw hat, Alpha fishes peacefully. He reflects. After swearing eternal loyalty to Lord Sigma, he took another look at what he could truly accomplish and organized his thoughts. The goal, he thinks, is extremely simple. 3 hanging banners summarize everything. Develop the frontier territory and strengthen its military forces, raise his lord's prestige within the empire, and win the war against the neighboring country. He considers this final goal might be a little too ambitious. 2 buoys in the water gently bob up and down. Suddenly, the fishing rod bends sharply. Excited, he shouts, "I got one." Excited, Alpha struggles with the rod. This one is really big. His foot plants firmly on the boat, he reflects. Even the longest journey begins with a single step. He will continue building one thing at a time, everything within his power. He struggles against the force of the line, water splashing dramatically. Triumphantly, he pulls the enormous fish out of the water, smiling broadly. He swears, his eyes shining, he will reverse the downfall 3 years from now recorded in the history of the rise and fall of the empire. He swears he will. Raising the fish proudly, he comments, "This is a great fishing spot. It would be a waste not to make proper use of it." He stops, confused. Someone standing on the shore calls out to him with their arms raised. He waves frantically at someone on the other side of the water. "Hey, I caught a big one." The person on the other side shouts back, their voice cut off by the wind, behind you." Confused, Alpha asks, "What did you say?" He repeats, intrigued, behind. Suddenly, a gigantic wave explodes right behind him. He is swept away by the current. He is launched into the air along with his hat and the fish. The boat capsizes from the impact of the monstrous wave. Soaking wet and sprawled out on the dock, he gasps, What the hell was that?" A local man explains, pointing toward a monstrous silhouette with a glowing red eye. "There's a monster lord in Lake Baltsa. You always need to keep an eye on your surroundings." He continues, "They rarely come close to the shore, but you were lucky you weren't eaten, kid." Soaking wet and exhausted, Alpha only mutters, I had no idea." The scene changes to the facade of a large castle. Yoda greets him at the door. "I heard you went to inspect the lake. You really went swimming at this time of year." Shivering from the cold with his arms crossed, Alpha only mutters, Sorry for being an idiot." Walking beside him, Oda warns, "You'll catch a cold if you don't change your clothes soon." Defeated, Alpha drags himself inside, grumbling. In Alpha's room, he sits on the bed, drying himself with a towel. A knock on the door interrupts him. He says they can come in. Excited, Sheeta bursts into the room. "Alpha, people are saying you're trying to avoid sword training by pretending to be sick." She teases, "That's terrible prejudice." Laughing, she moves closer to him. "Just kidding. Everyone really is worried that you're going to work yourself to death." Surprised, wrapped in a towel, Alpha reacts, "Seriously." She lists his routine. He works in the stables early in the morning, participates in the night's training, fulfills his duties as a squire, and on top of that goes out alone to inspect the territory. He's pushing himself too hard. Alpha protests, but there's not much he can do about that. He's already far behind in sword training, and restoring the territory's finances is urgent. She suggests, "At least ask to be excused from your stable duties." With a wide smile, he declares, "I do the stable work because I like it." Her face lights up, blushing, visibly touched. She gives in, Then I guess there really isn't anything I can do." Alpha confirms, "Exactly." Curious, she asks what he was planning to do at Lake Baltsa. Raising a finger, he explains. Well, first, as part of his plan to turn the Marquis' territory into a tourist destination, he wants to build a boat dock, a bathing area along the lakeshore, and a fishing area with boats. A banner unfurls, tourism development plan, he continues. Next, they will use the lake as a fishing area, a valuable source of aquatic resources for the Marquis' territory and inland regions without access to the sea. Confused, she asks what aquaculture is. He adds, eventually he also wants to invest in that. Thoughtful, finger to his lips, he murmurs, "And there's one more thing I want." She reacts, "What?" Smiling, he admits, "Somehow I have a feeling this could turn into quite a gamble." Suddenly, he sneezes. She panics. "Oh no, Alpha. Did you catch a cold from falling into the lake?" She offers him her own handkerchief. He refuses. "No, I'm fine." Pulling himself together, he changes the subject. Anyway, we need to defeat the monster lord of Lake Baltsa." She questions him, but even the Marquis Knights couldn't defeat it, right? He confirms, yes, it seems they simply couldn't figure out how to defeat a gigantic underwater monster like that. She wonders, wouldn't it be better to simply not mess with such a troublesome monstrous fish right off the bat? Downcast and defeated, Alpha mutters, Thinking about it that way, is it really worth risking everyone's lives just to defeat it?" Raising his fist with determination, Alpha declares, If necessary, I'll defeat it myself. Suddenly, everything spins around him and he breaks into a cold sweat. Something is wrong. He falls backward off the bed. Shida is startled. Alpha. Smoke and heat seem to rise around him, lying down, feverish, his face red, drenched in sweat with a wet cloth on his forehead. Yoda reports to Shida it's already been 3 days of a terrible fever. Herbal medicines aren't working and even the doctor can't identify the cause. Delirious, Alpha apologizes. Sorry, I promise I'll go back to work tomorrow. Yoda scolds him, don't be ridiculous, no work or training until you've fully recovered. Yoda turns to Shida. Lady Shida, our maid will take care of him from here on. Please return to your room. She refuses. No, just a little longer. Worried, she wonders, why can't even her own magic heal him? What could be causing this? A monstrous shadow appears with a glowing green eye and poison dripping from it. It was the poison of the lake creature. Yoda continues his report. Aside from the high fever, he shows no other symptoms. It could simply be the accumulation of fatigue. But seriously, he presses the point. If Lady Shida were to contract the illness, he would never be able to face the Archbishop. He asks her to understand. She reacts in astonishment. She relents. I understand, but if his condition gets worse, don't hesitate to call me. The scene changes. Marquis' estate meeting room. Sigma and another commander lean over the war table. Visconti reflects, the monster lord of Lake Bautza. Someone could end up dying if they aren't careful. Claude declares, that monster has been a problem ever since it took over the border territory. All that's left is to gather their courage and deal with it. With a slight smile, he notes that if they leave the beast alone, there's a certain idiot who might decide to go hunt it on his own. HMPH. I can't let a trainee squire kick me to the curb. Night falls over the mansion. Feverish, Alpha groans in pain. Clenching his teeth and sweating, he mutters, damn, what the hell happened to my body? A dramatic silhouette, red veins glowing. It seems that something has been advancing inside him all this time. He murmurs, instead of being useful, I'm only causing trouble for everyone. How pathetic, right at such an important moment. Determined, clenching his teeth even harder, I can't just lie here forever. I don't have time for this. In an explosion of determination, his body seems to concentrate mana in the center of his chest. All right, bacteria, viruses, whatever you are, come at me. I'll fight you until I can't take it anymore. In an extreme close-up, his eyes tremble and the colors distort in intense internal battle. Energy swirls around him. I won't lose to something as stupid as a fever. An explosion of light marks the climax of the internal battle. In the morning, the mansion stands beneath a blue sky, birds singing. Alpha wakes up confused. What the hell is this? He sits up shirtless and notices a small flaming creature on his leg making hissing sounds. He stares at it. You. What are you? The creature rubs its snout against his hand. He notices that it looks like fire but isn't hot at all to the touch. Are you some kind of ghost? The creature forms a circle of fire around him. If you're a monster, you definitely shouldn't be on the Marquis' estate. I'll have to eliminate you, you know. He stops. Come to think of it. He remembers, flipping through a book. Spirits, supernatural life forms born when one of the fundamental elements that shape this world, earth, water, fire, wind, or void, accumulates, multiplies, and becomes active due to certain coincidental geographical conditions. They cannot communicate with humans and immediately hide when they sense someone's presence. Spirits that have evolved over an eternity become highly intelligent beings capable of understanding human speech. As guardian spirits of the land, their guiding principle is to maintain the environment and ecosystem, which is why they mercilessly punish those who destroy nature. However, there are extremely rare cases in which they have helped humans. Alpha asks the creature, are you a spirit? Intrigued, he insists, far from immediately hiding, why are you so attached to me? Alpha asks if the creature can use fire magic and, curious, hands it a piece of paper to see if it can burn it. The small flame sets the paper ablaze without hesitation. Surprised, he exclaims that it's amazing, like a lighter. A knock on the door interrupts the moment. It's Shida, surprised to find him already standing and acting normally so early in the morning. She asks how he's feeling and Alpha replies that the fever has completely disappeared. Excited, he tries to show her the creature, drawing her attention to this one, but when Shida looks, the spirit has already vanished. Confused, Alpha doesn't understand where it went. Without delving into the matter, Shida insists that he take the day off to prevent the fever from returning. The scene changes to the area around the mansion, among the large trees. Alone, Alpha sees the creature again as it happily reappears beside him. Thoughtful, he wonders if it lives inside his own body and considers whether he accidentally swallowed it when he fell into Lake Bautza. He also wonders whether it was the one that caused his high fever or whether it was born from it, like the chicken and egg dilemma. Curious about the creature's abilities, Alpha decides to test its magic. He holds a twig with a leaf and asks it to set it on fire from a distance. The spirit fires a precise fireball, incinerating the target with accuracy. Impressed, Alpha celebrates the result. He repeats the test several times, varying the distance of the targets, and soon finds himself surrounded by several burned twigs. Sitting down, impressed by the creature's consistent accuracy, he pets it and comments that if it had firepower to match its aim, it would be extraordinary. Curious to know whether elements can be combined, Alpha uses wind magic at the same time, forming a whirlwind, and asks the creature to send its fire through it with precision, hitting the target. It lets out a cry and the fire passes through the wind vortex, but the result is far stronger than expected. The flame grows uncontrollably as it mixes with the wind, and Alpha realizes too late that the combination has become dangerous. An explosion of fire hits him head-on, scorching him and setting part of the nearby tree on fire. Desperate, he runs through the mansion carrying 2 buckets of water to put out the fire, while someone angrily demands to know what he did. Once the situation is under control, Alpha realizes he can no longer hide what happened and worries about what excuse he'll give the head butler. Even so, when he picks up the creature and holds it in his arms, he melts with joy and declares that it has the best synergy with his wind magic. Determined, he announces that he has already chosen a name for it, Ace. Alone among the trees, Alpha promises to keep Ace a secret from everyone for now. The scene changes to the sea, where a flock of wild birds flies over the coast near Lake Baltsa. One of them, fierce-looking with red plumage, lands on a cliff and lets out a piercing cry. The creature, with its exposed skull and sharp fangs, tilts its head toward the water below the cliff, alert to something. Without warning, a column of water rises behind it. An agonizing scream echoes beneath the surface, and feathers and blood spread across the dark water. On the surface, only floating feathers and a spreading red stain remain, a sign that something at the bottom of Lake Baltsa has just devoured it. The scene changes to the Leonia's mansion. In the meeting room, Vice Commander Claude officially leads the beginning of the subjugation operation against the master of Lake Baltsa, a large-scale military effort requiring the cooperation not only of the Margrave's knights, but also of the citizens of the domain. He explains that subjugating the creature depends on fulfilling 3 essential conditions. The first is to lure the master close to the lake's shore. Since it is impossible to remain combat-ready while waiting for an encounter in such a vast lake, they need to understand its behavior and set a trap. The second condition is to never enter the water. The knights would be unable to use their sword techniques underwater, and the risk of casualties would be catastrophic, requiring a strategy that uses the terrain to everyone's advantage and keeps them protected. The third is to block the creature's escape route and eliminate it without fail, because if it escapes to the bottom of the lake, it will become unreachable, and a wounded monster would pose an even greater danger to the population. As he walks with Ace, Alpha reflects that the first condition is the greatest obstacle. The residents who have suffered from the lake master for years only fish near the shore early in the morning, always on alert, and avoid approaching during the day. Sightings of the creature on land are extremely rare, with some years passing without it ever appearing. That, he concludes, is why the Margrave's knights have never been able to subjugate it all these years. On the beach, workers erect wooden structures and nets along the coast as part of the preparations for the operation. One of them, Gaston, is confronted for striking and destroying part of what was being built. When questioned about who gave him permission to build that there, he reacts furiously, claiming that the land does not belong to him. Surprised by the audacity of someone challenging him, Gaston makes it clear that he never expected to find anyone in Lake Baltsa willing to stand up to him. Ignoring the warnings, Gaston raises his spear and destroys another one of the wooden structures, shouting that he is going to smash all of it. Alpha watches the scene from a distance, impressed by the man's fury and recognizing him as someone dangerous. Loda, the head butler of the mansion, appears beside Alpha and asks what is causing such a commotion. Meanwhile, on the beach, one of the workers tries to restrain Gaston, warning him that the pier was ordered by the Margrave himself, and that if he keeps interfering, he will be beheaded. Gaston hesitates for a moment, shaken upon hearing that it is an order from the feudal lord. But he soon regains his arrogance. A companion beside him provokes him, asking if he is afraid now, since it is already too late to back down. Enraged, Gaston raises his spear again, shouting that he does not care what the feudal lord thinks. That is when a young man with light-colored hair and an imposing presence appears behind him. Unaware of his presence, Gaston defiantly insists that even if his head rolls, he will not let anyone mess with Lake Baltsa as they please. The other workers watch in shock, pointing in panic. Faced with the nobleman's cold gaze, Gaston finally becomes terrified and stammers an apology. Alpha intervenes just in time, grabbing the nobleman's arm and protesting that beheading him would be going too far. The young man stares at him silently for a moment, then lets Gaston go and simply walks away. Loda approaches and recognizes Gaston, greeting him by name. The man, surprised, recognizes him as well and asks why everyone is gathered there. Loda explains that the Lord has decided to subjugate the master of Lake Baltsa and asks whether Gaston would like to help with the undertaking. Shocked, Gaston says that it is absurd and categorically refuses, stating that they should never even consider subjugating the master of the lake. Before the conversation can heat up any further, Gaston leaves the area. Alpha asks Loda if the two already knew each other. The butler confirms it and explains that Gaston is the leader of the fishermen who live around Lake Baltsa. The scene shifts to the misty shore of the lake, where the fishermen continue their daily work. Gaston skillfully casts his net into the water and soon pulls out a good-sized fish. Watching closely, Alpha comments on the impressive size of the catch, wondering if it might be a rainbow trout. Gaston confirms that even though it is out of season, the fish is well-fed and fatty, a result of the nutrients flowing down from the stream originating at the sacred Mount Euremia. According to him, the fish are not the only ones benefiting. The birds and beasts in the region also grow enormous because of it. Alpha immediately understands. That is why the master of the lake itself has become so gigantic. Gaston then pulls only a crab from the net, and an awkward silence fills the scene. Curious, Gaston asks if he has ever seen the master personally before. Alpha confesses that a few days earlier he went fishing without knowing about the danger, and the monster overturned his boat. He thought he was going to die right there. Furious upon hearing this, Gaston grabs him by the clothes and scolds him, asking what kind of amateur goes out alone on a boat like that. Cowering, Alpha apologizes, admitting that he did not know there was such a monster in the lake. Gaston releases him with an irritated grunt, but then notices something and asks if he is not a servant of the feudal lord, telling him to learn some manners. Alpha introduces himself, stating his name and apologizing for not having behaved properly. Gaston warns him not to bring shame to the Margrave's name or to Yoda. Alpha reflects on this, realizing that his behavior could also tarnish the reputation of the entire Leonia's house. Bowing deeply, Alpha enthusiastically thanks him for the lesson. Gaston grumbles that he will remember that, but cannot resist commenting that the boy is a strange fellow. At the end of the day, the group of fishermen finishes working and begins gathering their equipment. Surprised, Alpha asks if they are already finishing so early. Gaston explains that as soon as the sun rises and the water warms up, the master of the lake awakens, which is why they prefer not to be nearby at that time. Astonished, Alpha asks if he really knows when the creature will appear. Gaston clarifies that he does not know the exact location. The creature has never been spotted there that early, but it is better to be safe than sorry. Disappointed, Alpha mutters that he thought the biggest obstacle to the subjugation operation had already been solved. The answer irritates Gaston, who smacks the boy on the head and scolds him, shouting that no one should even think about touching the master. It is not something humans can fight. Left alone, rubbing his aching head while the other workers walk away, Alpha grumbles irritably to himself. That night in Gaston's cabin, the old man eats dinner alone by lamplight. Suddenly, Alpha bursts in excitedly, apologizing for visiting so late. Startled, Gaston scolds him, asking what he thinks he is doing barging into someone else's house like that. Alpha tries to calm him down, revealing that he brought a gift, a bottle of alcohol that he admits he stole from the head butler Yoda's secret stockpile. Shocked, Gaston asks if he is serious, and Alpha, grinning widely, invites him to drink without restraint. Hours later, Gaston laughs loudly, clearly drunk. Alpha scolds Gaston for provoking the Count, who nearly had him beheaded earlier, warning that joking around like that could cost him his life. Without being bothered, Alpha declares that the stone-faced man simply does not understand human emotions. Gaston laughs and retorts that everyone in that mansion, including the feudal lord himself, must be a little strange too, considering they employ a boy as strange as him. Alpha responds that badmouthing the boss is grounds for beheading. Gaston reflects and agrees. Despite everything, the Margrave is an honorable man. He remembers that the knights, the mansion's staff, and the lord himself genuinely trust one another. Alpha says that he once heard Lord Sigma say that the people of his domain are his own family. Gaston falls silent at those words, covering his mouth for a moment. With a dry grunt, he asks if it was Yoda who told Alpha that. The boy confirms that it was. Alpha then remembers the entire story Yoda told him in his office 3 years earlier, shortly after Sigma took command of the frontier. At that time, the Order of Knights began eliminating monsters throughout the domain, and naturally subjugating the master of Lake Baltsa became part of their plans. If fishing in the region became safe, the aquatic resources would bring enormous profits. The knight chosen to lead the investigation was Christophe. He spent some time among the fishermen trying to identify the exact time and location where the master usually appeared. Charismatic and approachable enough to make them forget his position, he quickly fit in among the lake fishermen. With Gaston in particular, he formed such a close friendship that the two were often mistaken for father and son. But the master's behavior remained a complete mystery, forcing the knights to reconsider the entire subjugation plan. Eager to put an end to it, for Gaston's sake as well as that of the other fishermen, Christophe boarded a small boat with the old man to investigate the depth of the lake. Unfortunately, the two ended up encountering the master in person. The creature charged at the boat, and Christophe threw himself in front to protect Gaston, being devoured before his eyes amid an explosion of blood and wreckage. Gaston survived but screamed in horror as he watched his friend disappear beneath the waters. Christophe's body was never found. Faced with the proven danger and such a great sacrifice, Yoda explained to Alpha that the subjugation of the master was abandoned at that time. Back in the present, inside the quiet cabin, Gaston remains seated at the table beside Alpha, the weight of the memory hanging between them. Gaston pours himself another drink and grumbles that dreaming of defeating that monster had always been foolish. It was Christophe's sacrifice that finally opened everyone's eyes to that fact. He explains that they already know the times when the master does not appear, and that as long as they fish in moderation during those periods, there is no problem. Taking another drink, he incredulously asks what they are trying to start now, after all this time. Alpha reveals that Sigma is serious this time. It is not only for the sake of the fishermen, but for the development of the entire Margraviate. He intends to complete the subjugation of the master no matter what. The news makes Gaston choke on his drink, protesting that he never asked for any of this. Filled with enthusiasm, Alpha insists that in order to avenge Christophe as well, the old man needs to lend his strength to the cause. Gaston lets out a bitter laugh and asks if Christophe was the one who told him to seek revenge. Offended, Alpha retorts that this is no way to speak. Gaston scolds him, telling him not to be naive. What guarantee does he have that they can defeat the creature? He vents that it no longer matters whether they fish, whether they seek revenge, or anything else. None of it makes any sense anymore. Concerned about the old man's condition, Alpha seriously asks him to stop drinking, wondering anxiously if he let Gaston drink too much. Already visibly drunk, Gaston quietly mutters, if they manage to get revenge, would Christophe come back? Crying, he remembers that the man tried to protect even the life of an old man like him, that they cannot allow anyone else to become a sacrifice. Alpha is surprised by the confession. In Gaston's memory, an image of a young, smiling Christophe appears, suggesting that everyone eat together the fish he had just caught. Still in tears, Gaston admits that if he could meet him again, he would do anything, but he knows that is impossible. With his back turned, his voice choked with emotion, he quietly repeats that he just does not want anyone else to die. A heavy silence fills the room. Alpha watches the old man collapsed over the table and thinks to himself that he cannot drag Gaston into the hunt for the master. Perhaps he should simply give up pursuing that creature altogether. It is at that moment that the system appears before him. The bet chip system presents him with a new bet mission, to convince Gaston to join the hunt for the master. In disbelief, he quietly complains about the time the system chose to appear. The panel then displays the available options, asking which event he will compete in, heads or tails, a boat race, or a fishing competition, each with its own odds. Irritated that he has no choice in the matter, Alpha grumbles, asking if he cannot simply cancel it. After a moment of hesitation, he confirms his choice on the betting panel. Suddenly, he lets out a loud shout, startling Gaston, who is also startled. The old man, confused, asks what is happening. Alpha declares seriously that he completely understands his feelings, but since Gaston drank from the head butler Yoda's secret stock without permission, he cannot simply walk away empty-handed either. Gaston protests that Yoda himself had authorized the drink. Alpha argues that since neither of them is going to give in, they will just keep going around in circles, and that in moments like this, it is best to let fate decide. He pulls out a copper coin. Gaston, confused, asks what he is talking about, mentioning a god in astonishment. Alpha explains the bet. They will toss the coin into the air and bet on whether it lands with the crest of the Sylvester Empire facing upward or with the crown. If he wins, Gaston helps with the hunt for the master. If Gaston wins, he gives up on everything and goes home. Excited, he asks the old man what he thinks of the proposal. Suspicious, Gaston asks what he would gain by accepting the bet. Surprised by the old man's lucidity despite his drunkenness, Alpha quickly offers another incentive. If he wins, he promises to steal 3 more bottles from the head butler's stockpile for him. Gaston calls him a shrewd negotiator but soon becomes irritated, clarifying that he's not talking about alcohol. This is a matter of human lives, and he asks if Alpha truly does not understand that. Alpha firmly counters that Gaston is the one who does not understand. Smiling calmly, he explains that the Knights of the Margrave's army would never hesitate to sacrifice themselves to protect the people, and that Christophe surely would not regret doing so for even a second. Gaston falls silent, trembling with emotion. Alpha's fist clenches tightly. Now that Sigma has decided to hunt the master, those knights will see it through to the end, no matter the cost. Raising his clenched fist, Alpha declares that it does not matter how many people die. As long as Gaston keeps dwelling on the pain alone, he has only 2 choices: help or close his eyes to everything. Determined, he says he will let the coin decide for them, leaving their fate to something greater. Before Gaston can react, Alpha has already spun the coin into the air and shouted the new rules. If it lands with the crest facing upward, the old man wins and is free. If it lands with the crown, the 2 of them will avenge Christophe's memory together. He asks if that is clear. Gaston tries to protest, shouting that Alpha cannot simply decide that on his own, but it is already too late as the coin is spinning freely through the air. The coin lands. The crest of the Sylvester Empire appears facing upward. Smiling, Alpha announces that the old man has won the bet. Gaston reacts in confusion, not really understanding what just happened. Alpha, resigned, states that a promise is a promise. There is nothing he can do. He will give up and calmly return to the mansion. Embarrassed, Gaston mutters that things simply do not usually get resolved in such a convenient way. Alpha says goodbye, telling them to leave the hunt for the master to them. Despite having said earlier that it did not matter how many people died, he will not let a single person die. The cabin door slams shut behind Alpha as he leaves. Alone, Gaston remains seated in the dim light, hanging his head in silence as he dwells on everything he has just heard. The next morning from above, the beach reveals the piers nearly completed, with dozens of workers moving wood and equipment across the sand. Nearby, Yoda meets with Claude and Visconti. The commander observes that a single pier will not provide enough support. Visconti adds that they would like to surround the master from all sides, but that seems impossible. Curious, Alpha asks how they intend to set up the encirclement. The commander replies that they would need to circle around behind the master using a boat. Studying the blueprint on the table, Alpha suggests an idea of his own. If they build a structure at a certain point and then another one in sequence, they could close the trap in a different way. The proposal takes everyone by surprise. The commander acknowledges that if it is feasible, it would greatly expand their strategic options, and Yoda offers to consult the engineering division about the idea. Loda comments that he finds all of this quite interesting, intrigued by where the boy gets so many ideas. Visconti observes that the equipment to capture the master is already ready as well. A huge mechanical structure is revealed, a harpoon launcher mounted on a framework with a monster's skull on top, ready for operation. According to the commander, the only thing missing is to precisely identify where and when the master will appear, the biggest obstacle in the entire plan, as Visconti emphasizes. Yoda explains that they intend to position the bait at the exact location of the previous attack. At the same time, Alpha was attacked, using a boat with a meat net as bait. The commander agrees that this is much better than blindly searching the lake. Alpha reflects that thinking about it, he himself ended up experiencing an extremely rare event by encountering the creature. He suggests that perhaps it is time to hear the opinion of a true expert on the subject. At that moment, a gruff voice interrupts the meeting. Gaston approaches, reprimanding Alpha for going around spreading nonsense. Surprised, Yoda immediately recognizes him. Emotional, Gaston approaches and admits that he is ashamed to show up after everything that happened, but asks to be allowed to help as well. He admits that he wants to avenge Sir Christoph. Upon hearing the confirmation, Loda's face lights up and he raises his fist excitedly, gladly accepting the old fisherman's help, while the commanders watch the scene smiling in the background. As the group moves away from there, Alpha reflects to himself. He had been willing to throw away the 40 betting chips, but it seems that in the end he lost nothing. He recalls the exact moment of the bet with Gaston, shouting the new conditions, the crown with the crest facing up, and the old man would win free. If the other side came up, they would avenge Sir Christoph together, while Gaston protested too late that he couldn't simply decide that on his own. The truth Alpha reveals in his thoughts is that the coin used was rigged, made by gluing two sides bearing the crest together. The result, therefore, had already been guaranteed from the beginning. Even so, he acknowledges that if Gaston had decided not to help hunt the master, he would also have been at peace with that choice. But the old man chose to stand up on his own, without the trickery needing to decide anything. At that very moment, the betting chip system recognizes the outcome and credits 80 chips as a reward. Back with the group, Gaston makes a casual remark, reminding Alpha not to forget the 3 bottles from the chief butler Yoda's secret stash. Alpha panics at the blunder. Yoda, hearing everything, explodes, demanding to know how he discovered his private hiding place, and grabs the young man by the collar, shaking him violently in front of the others. Gaston announces that he has something important to tell everyone. He discovered a clue about the place where the master usually appears. The revelation catches Claude and the commander by surprise. The group then follows a trail through the forest toward the lake shore, led by Gaston. When they reach the water's edge, the old fisherman points and states that it is exactly there. He explains that several streams coming from Mount Uremia flow into Lake Baltsa at that point, causing fish to gather in the area. Wild berries also grow well there, attracting birds and beasts to feed frequently. Visconti concludes that this is precisely why the master appears to hunt the animals gathered there, and Gaston confirms it. Pointing farther ahead, the old man warns that, especially near that rocky area, he has already seen birds and beasts swallowed in the blink of an eye when they got too close. The camera reveals, isolated amid the blue waters, the rock marking the exact location of the trap. Curious, Miguel asks how Gaston managed to discover the master's hiding place in such an isolated location. Laughing, the old man replies that he spends entire days and nights walking along those shores. He then unfolds a hand-drawn map covered in red markings and asks Alpha to take a look. According to him, there are other spots that appear to be feeding grounds, but that one is the best place for an ambush. Impressed, Alpha is amazed to see that Gaston even recorded the exact dates and times of each sighting. Yoda, sweating nervously, asks if Gaston has been doing this since that day 3 years ago. Embarrassed, the old man brushes it off, saying it is only so he knows where the master usually appears and can fish peacefully in the other areas. Visconti approaches and places a hand on his shoulder, assuring him that they will avenge Christoph together with everyone's combined strength. Emotional, Gaston wipes his nose and replies, his voice trembling, "Yes, ma'am." Alpha watches him in silence with a slight smile. Determined, Claude orders them to use that location as their base of operations to refine the strategy, and the other knights respond in unison. Yoda takes charge of organizing the transportation of the materials to the scaffolding, and Miguel excitedly confirms that everything is under control. Quietly, Alpha asks Gaston if he is absolutely certain that the master will appear there within 20 days. The old man confirms without hesitation. There is no possible mistake. Under the full moon, he declares seriously that on the next full moon night, the creature will finally show itself. Over the next 20 days, the group throws itself into frantic preparations. Since they could only build the scaffolding at dawn during the short period when the master was absent and without being able to alter the terrain too much for fear of driving it away forever, the work progresses little by little, surrounding the target rocks from a distance to establish the interception position. Carefully and firmly, Alpha climbs the wooden structures, tying each rope with precision. He also helps secure the knots, satisfied with the result. At the end of the deadline, he shakes his dirty hands proud. They manage to finish just in time. The complete structure rises over the lake, ready for the confrontation scheduled for that very night. The decisive battle is finally about to begin. Under the night fog, a white sheep is tied on the small rocky island, bait to attract the master, calmly chewing the hay left in front of it, unaware of what is about to happen. The fog thickens beneath the scaffolding. Hidden among the trees surrounding the lake, dozens of eyes gleam in the darkness. The knights are already in position, ready to attack. The sheep isolated on the rock bleats nervously, sensing danger. Behind the structure, the enormous steel hook tied beneath the sheep's legs waits for the right moment, while beneath the full moon, glowing signals flash between the operators to confirm that everything is ready. The sheep continues chewing the hay, unaware of the water beginning to churn around it. Suddenly, a colossal jet of water bursts through the surface, completely swallowing the small rocky island. The master of Lake Baltsa emerges from the raging waters, jaws wide open, charging straight toward the defenseless bait and swallowing it whole. Its enormous fin slams against the surface, raising violent waves that shake the entire structure around it. The monster has been successfully hooked. Gaston lets out a furious roar, giving the signal to attack. The hidden knights come rushing out, charging beneath the scaffolding toward their combat positions. Organ shouts for the men to keep turning the mechanism with all their strength, and the troops respond in unison. Understood. The crank creaks under their combined effort as the monster thrashes about, trapped by the hook, whipping the water around it. Claude orders them to open the nets. A knight cuts the rope holding the trap with a precise sword strike, and the net comes loose, closing tightly around the structure. The capture of the master is finally beginning to take shape. The water continues thrashing beneath the scaffolding as squads of archers run along the wooden walkways, followed by spearmen taking formation throughout the structure. Visconti takes the front line alongside the soldiers, everyone ready for the coordinated attack. From above, the full extent of the trap is revealed. A horseshoe-shaped structure completely surrounds that section of the lake, trapping the creature in the center of the nets, surrounded on all sides. On the shore, Gaston watches the scene proudly beside Alpha and comments that he heard the pillars and walkway were the young man's idea, not bad. Excited, Alpha explains that this allows them to deploy the containment net all at once, while also providing a firm support point for the attack squad, killing two birds with one stone. Another explosion of water shakes the structure, a sign that the creature is still struggling violently against the harpoon rope. Curious, Alpha asks whether simply pulling it onto land like that wouldn't practically settle the fight. Gaston reprimands him, telling him not to talk nonsense, that is not an ordinary fish. Confused, Alpha can only stammer a huh. At the response, Gaston insists, did he really not know the master of Lake Baltsa is? The creature then reveals itself completely, rising from the waters in all its monstrous glory with sharp fangs and red eyes glowing with fury, a demonic lake serpent. Shocked, Alpha widens his eyes at the revelation. Gaston maintains a serious expression while Organ grits his teeth, gripping the crank tightly, and Visconti smiles confidently, watching everything closely. In the background, Claude maintains a stern and determined expression. Sigma appears with an impressive aura. Well, that's all for today. If you enjoyed today's recap, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe.